Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Robert cautiously peeked out of his hiding place to check. The wolf was still there. A wolf, or rather a police-sized beast capable of rivaling a cave-dwelling primitive creature. It hadn't gone anywhere and was carefree, rolling around in the freshly fallen snow, playing catch with its own tail and licking its rich coat. She seemed to demonstrate who was the true master of the situation here, and who was an unlucky little man, who by his stupidity, and as if as a punishment from the universe, got into such a story, which if you tell them, they won't believe and will call him a fantasist, an inventor, who just wants to distract normal people with scary stories. Robert sodding, because it was not to courage, but just very scary. I quietly closed the shutters of the window in the gatehouse and put the deadbolt back in place. He looked at the five, who shrewdly gave the last wood. There was, of course, still some simple furniture, so, theoretically, he wouldn't have to be cold for the next 24 hours. But the food was bad. The old woman, to all appearances, had not been used for the last years, so there was only what happened to be in her pocket, a chocolate nut bar. But even let it, having torn off the bar and its packaging, Robert greedily snatched a piece and started chewing vigorously. To save money, he saw no point in eating because he was about to risk everything by going outside. And there, if the wolf's offspring didn't catch him, he would soon reach human habitation because the village was at most an hour's walk away. If the wolf catches him, then it's foolish to think about anything at all. Then he won't need food anymore. How did I come to live like this? Robert asked aloud to himself, tearing the chocolate trace from his fingers. He didn't know the answer to that question, if only because just a couple of days ago, his life had been very ordinary and even peppery. However, this very peppercorn, which he decided to diversify his unsuccessful marriage of almost 10 years, and was, in fact, what led him to the present unenviable position. And if right now a good wizard appeared to Robert and offered to use a time machine to go back and fix everything, he would have agreed without a doubt. But the reality was that there were no good wizards around, and so the only thing to do was to live with what he had. If I live at all, Robert added aloud to his thoughts. Nervously, he giggled hysterically, because he really had no idea. How on earth would he ever get out of this whole thing now? When Robert had first married Wendy, he had belonged to that category of young people who believed that there was a place for true love, the kind of love that poets write poems about and fairy tales talk about. Robert was only 25 at the time, but the people around him called him unusually serious for his age, a young man who had not the wind in his head, but an organized plan. And that was actually true. Robert imagined his future in the style of finishing university and then living in a mansion. A successful businessman is happy with the woman he loves, and we have at least 4 children. What's there between uni and the life of a successful millionaire? He didn't have a very good idea and hoped that he would figure it out somehow. After all, life is such an amazing thing and always ready to throw up new opportunities and good luck. You just have to look at them and reach out. Yes, that's what he used to be. And now, when Robert looked back at his young self, he was so ashamed of it. Naive, self-righteous outrage. Nothing. Life will sort things out, Robert's grandmother often said. And as it soon turned out, life, or if you prefer, Mrs. Fate, either a higher power or a simple coincidence. But something Robert soon clicked on his nose and showed him his place, and not a prosperous man and future millionaire. And when that fall, or if you will, the slouching began. It seems, as Robert thought later, when relatives from all sides began to say enough, they said, stop putting money in other people's pockets for rent. Better take out a mortgage, you'll manage just fine. So he and Wendy decided to take out a mortgage. And when she was not yet a wife, but a bride, she did something for which Robert respected her for years. She gave up a wedding trip to a tropical island in order to save up for a down payment. Admittedly, after a few years, the topic was lost with the tropical vacation. Wendy often berated her husband. "Yeah, I do everything for you." She said it in almost every argument they had. "You're the reason I'd never seen the sea in my life. What's the problem?" For the next years was to go. Sometimes Robert tried to object. "You could even go alone, by the way, but maybe it would be cheaper that way." And when he said that, his smart and generally calm ones, Wendy would start sniffling like an indignant and simultaneously frightened gopher. And then she'd offer one of three counterarguments. First, it's unseemly for spouses to vacation apart. 2, they need to save money. And it's stupid. Cut back on spending all year, then splurge. Thirdly, she wanted to go to the seaside properly. They are in a mood that snatches from fate long desired, which constantly eludes her. And then sometimes, just sometimes, in lieu of such counterarguments, Wendy would start crying ugly tears with a wet, slippery nose, a shuddering of the shoulders, and a rise in tone to a level that was perhaps glass-breaking and weeping. This was how she was received at moments when Robert, out of ordinary sympathy and desire for reconciliation, tried to come over and hug her. "Don't touch me," Wendy might have exclaimed then. And he didn't. And when not only in such, but in many other quarrels, she said that she did not want to see him. Robert, accordingly, could shut up or leave the house, no matter what the weather or the time of day. But in general, if there was an outside observer who would call Robert for a frank conversation, and on the condition of anonymity, would ask him to say how he assesses his marriage, whether he is happy, Robert would answer positively, because, in principle, he is used to thinking that he is fine. He and Wendy are not a bad couple. Not the ideal woman, yes. Has it changed since you were a bride? Only ideals are only in fairy tales. But ideals are only in fairy tales, aren't they? And he's a little old for fairy tales in his 30s. And in this relatively contented state of marriage, Robert stayed for about 6 years. And then it went downhill. Like an avalanche, it mushroomed underneath, everything in its path. And what was the root cause? A lot of things. And then one day, Robert packed his suitcase. The pretext for leaving home was an imaginary business trip. In fact, Robert was not going to a neighboring city, but to other latitudes. To the sea. "Really?" Christina asked him enthusiastically. "Are you serious? You're not joking." "Who would joke like that?" Robert grinned, warmly, looking at the woman, at whose feet he was now ready to put not only the trip, but also many things, because she had become everything to him lately. And that woman was Robert's lover. And actually, if someone had told him a year ago that he would cheat, he would have laughed in that person's face. But life had decided otherwise. And this decision to have a mistress Robert made even before he met Christina, who worked in their office as his subordinate. She was a senior cleaner, or to put it more culturally, the head of the service company Sunrise, which decided that its own cleaning service is more reliable and profitable than hiring it from the outside from time to time. Not a big bird in theory, but Robert, for one thing, wasn't the kind of man who recognizes the strictures of social status. In the second place, you're charming, funny, and not belligerent. Christina was in love, it seems, with the entire staff. And to her credit, it was worth saying that she behaved decently and kept her distance with everyone except Robert. He himself couldn't quite understand why they'd gotten so close. "You're the real deal," Christina once said. "You've got it written all over your face." "Really?" he hummed confusedly. "And what did you read there?" "That you're unhappy in your marriage, and when you call your wife at lunchtime every day, you look like a man who's forced to pull out a fireplace with his bare hands." Robert couldn't find anything to say in response, because Christina was right. Lately, he'd been having a hard time with the obligatory good son role. And he wasn't the only one who owed everyone. He owed his parents to help build a cottage, to visit regularly, to tell them about life with Wendy. And in principle, the first was normal, because Robert understood that rest in the fresh air is necessary for a modern man. But the fact that his mother wanted to know details about family life, and then instructed him that he did not behave that way with his wife, that he should, and so to say. It was tense, but there was no way to avoid it. Otherwise, Mom grabbed at the heart. The son had grown up. She said sobbing mother is no longer needed in the trash and on the garbage dump. So, son, don't you want to send me and my father to a nursing home? Robert would get a kick out of it every time. If my father witnessed such a thing, he just rolled his eyes and grinned. I've lived with her all my life. Son, he said, and then he would try to calm his wife down. But Robert's mother was stubborn and knew how to take offense at the fact that someone did not obey her long and tastefully. Robert also owed a debt to the firm he worked for. However, it was understandable and natural. They give you money, you give them your professional skills. He was used to it. Everything was clear and normal here. And Robert owed Wendy, and he didn't realize it anymore, when he'd managed to become a debtor to her instead of a beloved husband. But lately she'd been going on and on about how tired she was of him getting up an hour early and rattling dishes while she made herself breakfast. From the way he pulls a blanket over her at night and coughs from what he sees as her dishwasher and multi-cook functions. They are women's favorites. That last one was actually funny and sad to the point of tears at the same time. So let's divide up the chores, Robert suggested. If you're tired, I'll help, of course. I don't need anything else, Wendy replied. I knew what I was getting into when I got married, but I thought you'd see me as a woman. Then Robert almost blurted out in reply that sometimes he saw in her, however, not the woman he loved, but the angry, a little hysterical, wild image. But of course he didn't say that and asked to clarify what was wrong. And it turned out that Wendy herself does not know. Gone is the romance. No more passion. And that's when he left home again, went to his parents' house. Only his father was there. Mom had gone to a distant relative. You know, it's probably my fault. I opened up to my dad. I should have gone to more doctors to fix the problem. Maybe then she wouldn't have thought I was worthless. You're not stupid, my father said. You talk like that. The point was that Robert and Wendy had been unable to have a child throughout their marriage. And of course, they'd had a lot of tests that showed they were perfectly healthy. Doctors were throwing up their hands, and only one of them made a suggestion that it could be a matter of genetic incompatibility, but it's not accurate. And more research was needed. But Wendy adamantly refused, and when we got home from that last doctor, there was another scandal, and she said that maybe she couldn't get pregnant because she subconsciously felt insecure around Robert. So should we get a divorce? He asked. Deef? No, replied Wendy. After a long silence, I still love you. And I love you. Hard S. Glazunov, answered Robert, except that these magic words came so easily this time and somehow faded, as if he had said something banal, like I love. Blueberry jam. Let's just live together, Wendy said then, looking into his eyes. We're already married, aren't we? Robert nodded silently. And they just went on living together. But that conversation had taken place almost 2 years ago, but it had been the starting point after which Robert had realized, deep down inside him, that something had cracked and fractured, and he would never be the same again. He tried to weigh everything judiciously. Should they really get a divorce? After all, just because a man and a woman got married didn't mean they had to live together all their lives. By default, this is a modern world, not a medieval one. But then he realized he really didn't want to break up with Wendy. Why not? If only because he's used to it. A family member. After all those years together. Yes, there were difficulties, but who doesn't have them? And then divorce is the need to divide the property, the apartment, for which the mortgage is paid, the car, which is also taken on credit. Divorce is a discord between relatives and friends who will take one side or the other. Divorce is pain. But who will guarantee that when they divorce, they will then meet people with whom they can create a better family than they had? There are no such guarantees. So Robert decides, well, they'll live together. And then maybe things would change. And then things did change, and he decided to cheat on his wife. The decision. It came unexpectedly, but mundanely, calmly. Just Robert suddenly heard colleagues talking about the fact that British scientists said that such a percentage of married couples cheat on each other. And Robert thought, what if his Wendy had had a lover for a long time? Maybe she does. And why wouldn't he find himself a woman? Take the edge off. No serious love, of course. But neither was living like this in a marriage that resembled breadcrumbs at the stage. Now he didn't have. He couldn't do it anymore. And then he turned his attention to Christina. They didn't start sleeping together right away. They just dated. You know, you're weird, Christina told him one day. It was summer, and they were walking in the park. And right now, they were up on a Ferris wheel to a height closer to where the birds fly. And I would have thought maybe even a maniac. Christina giggled. Why? Robert wondered. Because I read books about werewolves. That's sci-fi. Because you asked me out, but you've never kissed me, she said, like she meant it, but her eyes were warm and her lips were quivering. I was about to crack a smile. Or are you the kind of guy who doesn't need intimacy at all? It was strange, but Robert was embarrassed by the conversation. A grown man decides to have a mistress and is embarrassed when she talks about personal things. But isn't he stupid? But although he gave himself a mental smack, but outwardly held with a full sense of dignity. How can I be your mistress if there is nothing between us? Christina asked, looking him straight in the eye. And the wind brushed her blonde hair. But I can't call you a friend, answered at last. And then, one day we can have everything. One day, Christina grinned. What an amazing man you are. I like you for that, though. And now, she added with feigned courtly sternness, unless you want us to part when we go downstairs, just friends. Kiss me kissingly, vividly, and for real. Come on. And he kissed her, in a way that made her dizzy, and her breath rushed in a ridge of relaxed gold in his chest. And as they walked downstairs, stepping onto the ground, Robert realized he'd crossed the line. It wasn't just a dalliance anymore. He'd really cheated on his wife. And how disgusting it was, but at the same time cried inside a sweet feeling, as if with this vicious secret of his, he was paying Wendy in full for how cold, irritable, and uncomprehending she was. Yes, thought Robert, you've been ignoring me for too long, haven't you? Acting as if I were tied to you forever and had to listen to everything. What are you nagging me about? My wife. But it's not like that anymore. I'm free now, and I'll live my life as I choose. Our plane is preparing to make its final approach, so please fasten your seatbelts, and don't forget to look out the window. In front of you is the Pearl of the Seychelles, where an unforgettable vacation awaits you. The stewardess' sing-song speech of the charter flight that carried Robert and Christina to the resort came to an end, and many of the passengers clapped their hands. Just magical, Christina said once. Now that he was at a different point, Christina, he had no doubt whatsoever that he had made the right choice, flying to a vacation with Nancy, who was no longer the woman he had married long ago. It was a waste of money. As it is, he's not really committing anything that criminal. Yes, by accepted standards of morality, a man and a substitute for his wife is not a good man. But on the other hand, what about the fact that a wife can, over the years of marriage, literally push her spouse into it with her coldness, favor, and other flawed flaws? What is he a slave to her to suffer? No way in hell. That was Robert's thinking. As they walked down the airplane ramp, went through customs, and fished their luggage out of the belt. And he was also thinking that perhaps, and probably, this little love adventure would help him decide to get a divorce. Yes, indeed, it would be better that way. Otherwise, he and Nancy would continue to live like this, as if they were incomprehensible. Too bad for spouses, and not good enough for friends. And then, maybe by separating, they could finally be happy on their own. Maybe. Perhaps she will find a man to suit her, and they will be compatible in everything, including the ability to bear a child. And he, Robert, looked fondly at Christina, who was raving about the surrounding scenery, taking pictures, and licking exotic flavored ice cream. Coconut cactus. Want some? She offered him one. But Robert shook his head. He wouldn't risk such savagery. But the fact that he had tasted adultery almost once before, he liked it very much. When her husband left on a business trip, Wendy closed the door behind him and breathed a sigh of relief to finally be alone. Not that she was tired. Though yes, she was tired. Walking to the hall and bedroom, she opened the shutters, letting sparks of frosty fresh air into the rooms. Finally, she could get some fresh air. My husband was always grumbling that it was blowing. Asked me to close it. And Wendy thought, no need for a hearty hot meal tonight. She'd have enough yogurt and cookies. And then, since it was her day off, she could occupy the TV all evening to watch her favorite show, and some silly show. Not that her husband forbids it, but definitely the grumbling grandmother reminded her, it's not the most intellectual vacation, and it would be better to watch this or that popular blogger who tell a story about space. Wendy only nodded and asked me not to try to bring her up anymore. Yeah, I'm not. Robert replied one day. I just want to get you interested in something. Why? She asked. Because people in a family should have common interests. Why? She repeated. A question, and with an unhealthy, as she herself realized, pleasure. Noticed that her husband began to get a little irritated. Yes, because when people live together, they should have something in common besides the payment of utility bills and the same bed, he added, suppressing six at the end, with the words that in this very bed, by the way, they have not had anything in the intimate plan for almost a year. But Robert didn't say that because he didn't want to rudely insult the woman he had once loved with all his heart and still respected. In a way, you can just live together. Wendy shrugged and went back to watching her show. We're a bunch of people in one house in the countryside where there wasn't a root vegetable garden, though. Tried to play farm life and build love. You having been voted in periodically by the viewers. Robert wrinkled his nose. Personally, he thought his wife was watching nonsense, and perhaps that's why she had become like that. Or maybe one didn't depend on the other. And he was just a snob with a prejudiced opinion, mixed with a quiet as a spectacle in the depths of the volcano-cool, still lava dislike for the man he once loved. The bonds of affection for whom are now seen as chains, and the obligations of a close relationship as a burden. Previously, both parties. But be that as it may, Robert had not tried to instill his interests in Wendy for months, and was silent about how he himself spent his free time. Wendy only knew that he was fixing something there in the garage, helping a friend to collect old junk, proudly called retro car, and also goes to the rope park, where, of course, risked breaking his neck. Also, oh well, it's been done before anyway. Wendy was already used to taking her husband indifferently. It was better than worrying about them being estranged. Better to give each other freedom and just live side by side. Yes, it was possible. And Wendy had the example of her own parents in front of her. Molly and Sam had even divorced when Wendy was just a baby. But then, under pressure from relatives and realizing that their daughter needed a full family, they had come together. And even now, when she's grown up and left the nest, they're still together. Habit. Molly once explained the situation to her daughter. We just realized it was more peaceful. And you never regretted not finding love? Wendy asked. The conversation had taken place shortly before the wedding with Robert. Love grinned bitterly. Molly. What is it? Scientists say it's the hormones a person produces. But you and I are not teenagers to believe in that nonsense. Love can be a good thing at first to help you know what kind of person you want to be with. And then, when you've gotten used to it, you get used to it. It's okay if love passes, but there are still a lot of important things left to do. Even the most important things. Molly raised her finger emphatically. You know what I mean. The possessions that mutual friends have made together. The closeness in terms of having someone around to take care of you if anything. And you just live together because one person can't be close. And if you chase love, I'm sorry to be blunt. Like an animal, a man will love, fall out of love. And what? Split up. Destroyed the family. No, daughter, love is a fairy tale. It's a beautiful, brightly colored fruit, you know. But it's what's inside the fruit that counts. The flavor, cautiously suggested Wendy, who didn't quite get the gist of what her mother was telling her about vitamins. Molly grinned. You think? Carefully with squeamishness, said Wendy. Me and Robert might be the same way. I mean, one day we'll love each other. No one can predict, Molly replied. Otherwise, the world would be a trouble-free place. Hello. Yes, this is his wife. Wendy answered the phone from the office where her husband worked. 2 days after he left on a business trip, there was a pan frying turkey meatballs. Robert hated those, by the way. The husband did not understand how important it was to watch his health and demanded nightmarishly unhealthy cutlets with fatty pork and white bread. What do you mean it hurts? Oh, Wendy, no matter how their relationship went, but she did not show rigid indifference to her spouse. So he became alarmed when a colleague of Robert's began to inquire about his health. What do you mean? On sick leave. You sent him on a business trip, didn't you? Wendy sat down on a chair. A confused message was heard from the other side. And then Robert's colleague said that he knew that the man had said he was very sick, so he wouldn't be at work for 5 days. He would bring the certificates later, and he had not been sent on any business trip. We were afraid that there was an epidemic. A colleague chuckled nervously and explained that Christina had taken sick leave along with Robert. Wendy replied that no, her husband isn't home. He's gone in general, and she doesn't understand what's going on. The colleague from the other side hurriedly ended the conversation, only asking that as soon as Robert showed up, he was told that he was very much needed in the office, and an explanation for what the project at risk of disruption is also needed. From the kitchen came the distinct odor of fried food. It was time to take the cutlets off and send them off to finish cooking in the oven. But Wendy stood in the hall with the phone in her hand and frowned, trying to figure out what was going on. Then determinedly, she pressed the call to Robert's contact. Yes, he answered. What's wrong? I'm on the road. I told him not to bother you. Where are you? Wendy asked, and Robert was strangely silent. It seemed that in that silence, he knew what he knew. He'd been caught in a lie. Honey, I told you, the office called, said Wendy. You weren't sent on a business trip, Wendy, and I'll explain. Robert had taken the call as he stood on the quay and was now trying to find a quiet, secluded spot. There was a motley festival of local culture taking place on the island, and it was quite noisy. He was already regretting picking up the phone. Where are you? On a soap opera. Wendy, don't lie to me. Am I too young to tell you about my bare feet? Robert was bitten by some kind of insect. They said it's lice season on the island, and he wasn't expecting lice. The aggressive microphones made him very nervous and itchy. Why are you telling me with a Wendy? Gone somewhere. You what? What's that noise? There were girls and guys dancing around Robert who liked to palm their hands, a musical instrument like a drum. So you're in some kind of joint. Who do you think I am? Robert got mad. I don't drink at all. They're just dancers. Oh, that's what dancers are, girls. No, Wendy, you got it wrong. What's that noise out there? The hearing was terrible, but Wendy could make out something suspicious. You're at sea, Robert muttered. What are you? The kitchen no longer smelled very smoky from the kitchen. It was burning meat. You're at sea. You and your mistress have gone to a resort. The last one was spontaneous, and actually Wendy didn't believe it because it would be a ridiculous and idiotic platitude. I guessed, blurted out Robert, who was starting to get a little crazy from the scorching sun of the Marshik musicians who positively surrounded the tourist. Plus, this morning they'd been cheated out of money selling the Coral Reef tour. And although the loss was recovered thanks to the local police, the fallout remained. I'm off to the sea with my mistress, said Robert. What did you want me to do? Go on vacation with you? Does it hurt? I've had enough. We live worse than the neighbors. Why? I married you in the first place. You idiot. That you loved me. Smoke was coming from the kitchen besides the smell. Wendy was choking. Tears seemed to have accumulated in her whole being over the past years, but they couldn't find a way out. I love you, she whispered, and she didn't end the call, just threw the phone hard into the wall. And the foam turned out to be very sturdy and didn't even crack. Nancy picked up the smartphone. Robert was breathing heavily. The artists realized that the tourists did not care about them, continued to move along the embankment. What have I done? The first thought flashed through my mind. It's her own fault. The second thought flashed. I should call her. Gnaw a question into her brain. No, let her cool off, and I'll do the same. And besides, Robert wiped his face clean of sweat. Now you have to think really hard about what to say, because it looks like he just destroyed his marriage. Wendy acted machine-like. She walked to the kitchen, took the skillet off the stove. You twisted the cold water faucet and stuck her dishes under the spray. The body finally gave in. Tears streamed down her face, and she felt a little better. Cheated, betrayed, heavy bells rang in my brain. Wendy went back into the hall after taking care of the frying pan. She lay down on the couch, curled up in a ball like a cat, and hugged the pillow, howled softly into it. It hurt. How can it hurt like that? Tearing something up inside if you're not physically ill. How can you want to fall through the ground, to dissolve into nothingness, and still be able to continue in your body? How could you love a person so much and hate them at the same time? She didn't catch that moment when she fell asleep, rather immersed in the heavy drama, the one her brain had sent her soul-suffering body into. And when Wendy opened her eyes, she realized it was 0 o'clock or evening still in the winter's early darkness. You can tell. The TV was still on. Wendy lost her eyes. The picture kept popping up. Must be because she cried a lot. Kevin, the Tega master, famous in his day, had finally returned to his students, the journalist said. The boy completely in a funny gray hat, tied ears. Behind the boy's back stretched the humblest-looking village. What's in store for us? Cheerfully, we will finish with a red nose. He asked the audience, will Kevin have new followers, or will some of the old ones follow the teacher who has returned from almost 10 years of confinement in a psychiatric hospital? Unfortunately, continued the journalist, shifting from foot to foot, we did not manage to communicate with the hero of our story. He, as before, leads the life of a recluse, but we will try to keep you informed. And if you want to know more about the mysterious master of the Tega, then be sure to watch the documentary, which you can find online at the portal. Wendy frantically grabbed the remote and turned off the TV, her pleas cold sweat, and not from hysteria. It was just that now the past, which she thought was long buried, suddenly appeared to her. The airplane soared into the sky. Robert leaned back tiredly in his chair. The last couple of days, that is, the end of the little vacation in the Seychelles, had not been easy for him. And most importantly, he had ruined it all himself. After all, if only he hadn't answered his wife's call, he would have called her back later. For example, from the hotel room. Then, perhaps, it would have been possible to compose a true lie, and everything would have been fine. At least for those couple days. But Robert held back from ruining Christina's vacation and told her everything just before the return flight. So now she knows all about us, the young woman sighed. Your hands are icy cold, she said, drawn across the windowsill chair and wrapped her fingers around his palm. So we should get together and talk about everything. What? Robert, rounding my eyes. You want to meet my wife. Have you forgotten what we talked about? I squinted my eyes reproachfully. Christina, I told you from the beginning I don't want to spend a few years as a married man's mistress. We're trying to build a relationship together. And if all goes well, we reveal the whole truth. Divorce is all serious and honest. Yes, I remember, nodded Robert. They had that arrangement. And because of it, by the way, he had even more respect for Christina. A serious woman, not willing to torture the other side for years for nothing, making everyone live a lie. Except But technically, Robert's lips trembled in a nervous smile. We never became lovers in that very sense. I know, Christina grinned, and lingered even closer than she'd poked him on the cheek. And I kept wondering what was the point of getting a room for two and sleeping in separate beds. And I thought that here in this corner of Christina we could bond, take our relationship to the next level. But you're right. We're not technically lovers, but we're not really friends anymore. Any normal woman would start twiddling her thumbs. That we spend time together, that we have dinner, that we kiss, that we vacation together. She'd consider all that cheating. The full ones. And we don't even need a bed. Besides, even if we say nothing happened, you know she won't believe us. Yeah, Robert sighed. It's just that it's all so sudden. And you compare it to a sore tooth that could have hung around for months, but had to be pulled. Christina offered a not the most apt, but vivid parallel. Unpleasant, unexpected. But then you can forget about it. Robert knocked on the door a second time. He had his own keys, of course, but he would have preferred to enter the apartment so that Wendy would let him in. But she wouldn't open the door or answer the phone. It was understandable, though. Robert would not have been surprised to find the apartment empty, that is, the absence of his wife's things, and then to find her at her parents'. He was morally prepared that Wendy would tell about the affair to all relatives and acquaintances, and it would start. But for what he discovered when he opened the door with his own key, entered the apartment, he wasn't prepared at all. What is this? Christina pressed her palm to her mouth, and with her other hand pointed to the wreath. A funeral black wreath stood in the hallway, and on the ribbon was the name Wendy. No, dropping her travel bag on the floor. Robert, swaying as if drunk, strode down the corridor into the hall. Wendy, he thought he screamed, but in fact he whispered. Other tragic signs were found here. Mingled with the black cloth of the platinum cabinet mirror, on the joint photos stood black ribbons on the high pedestal, and carnations scattered on the floor. No. Robert clutched his hands in his hair. He looked around hysterically, as if he expected Wendy to materialize out of thin air, and it would all turn out to be some monstrous mistake, some stupid misunderstanding. She, Christina, was about the same shock. No one called you from the family. No sobbing, like Robert. The thought went through her head that something had happened to her. Maybe her heart burst from grief. He'd heard of such things, and he didn't know if his Wendy was real. Wendy's family. She'd died, and he hadn't been told, hadn't seen fit, because he cheated. Robert. He shuddered in his bitter stupor, didn't immediately realize what was happening. Christina was waving her hand in front of his eyes and pointing at the phone. It was Wendy's phone. It was ringing. The caller ID was signed as Mom. Yes, Robert took the call. He waited to hear something that would confirm his fearful hunch. Robert, son, Molly spoke in her usual good-natured manner. Tell her to call me anyway. What? Robert pressed his hand to his chest. His heart was heavy, booming somewhere in his throat. Molly answered from the sanitarium. Or else she's gone and got some milk. No, let her call me and tell me normally what they feed there, what procedures there are. I mean, why the treatments? Christina's eyes widened. She also obviously wanted to understand what the conversation was about. Robert, after a couple of minutes, when he gave out only aha and aha, plus also necessarily Molly Vasilievna, finally ended the conversation and turned to the almost mistress with a silly face. She, living in the morning with her mother, said in the sanatorium left. And what is this? Christina waved his hands. How? But what does it mean? I don't know. Robert sat down on the couch with 2 fingers, putting the carnation aside. This is crazy, he muttered. She's alive, so it's this one. Go ahead, dial her again from her cell phone. Robert scratched his head, then recounted the conversation with his mother-in-law to Christina in detail. From the words of Molly, and Wendy went to a country sanatorium to improve her health over the weekend, which she additionally took time off work. She said that the sanatorium is necessary because the doctor advised so. Yes, also just wants to relieve stress and will take her phone with her. But the other one's not a smartphone. It's got buttons, but he will almost never use it because the psychologist advises minimum communication even with family and maximum focus on himself. Only understand the point, said Robert. My wife has never seen a psychologist. I suggested it to her myself. I told her that there were specialists in family relations, but she didn't understand it. You know, Christina said thoughtfully, twirling something in her hands and then holding it out to Robert, who took it and frowned. It turned out to be a booklet of the sanatorium Cedar Grove, which told about luxury outdoor recreation in high comfort. Look, there's an address and directions, Robert said, running his finger along one side of the booklet. So she went to the sanatorium after all, Christina said, confused. But what's this all about? I have no idea. Robert got up. But I'll find out. I'm going after her. I'm with you, and don't you dare object. Christina raised her hand warningly. After all, it's my fault too. I'll tell your wife myself that nothing happened between us. That now Robert was at a loss. And I thought, I don't know what's wrong with her head. Christina stepped carefully over the nail. But a normal person wouldn't do that. She's definitely having a nervous breakdown. And we're responsible for that. So let's get to the bus station. It's in the Cedar Groves by the Elks Antlers. But I think we'll get there soon. Robert tried to call his wife on the second number while we were getting there, but she was already picking up. He whispered in agonized anticipation, listening to one dial tone after another. And then suddenly they were gone too. Now the caller was temporarily unavailable. And Robert finally reached the sanatorium. And on first impression, it was a decent place. It was located in the suburbs, was really surrounded by cadders and their other warriors of trees. Hello, Robert. I flew up to the reception desk. Good morning. Smiled at the girl behind the counter. Welcome. I'm not on vacation. I'm looking for my wife, Robert blurted out. I'm sorry, the girl behind the counter said, embarrassed. I don't quite understand you. Robert tried to explain that his wife had come here and he needed to talk to her urgently. Family business. They had a fight and he's worried she might be a little out of sorts. I'm sorry, but we don't share information about our guests with third parties. The girl took a chance. What third party? Robert was indignant. I'm her husband. Good afternoon. There's a problem. There's a new character at the front desk. The receptionist is a very polite and equally repulsive-looking man in a suit. He too remained deaf to Robert's requests and demands and recommended him to contact his wife in any way he could, but not by trying to rage in their sanatorium. Robert, however, was stubbornly adamant. So, man, I tried a nice way. The mask of politeness fell off the receptionist's face. You're about to get kicked out by security. Get out. Pardon me for interrupting, but you're Wendy's husband. Maiden name Snigger. Robert turned around glumly, ready for someone else to show up who will prevent him from finding his wife. The man standing next to him did not look like a sanatorium employee. Rather, he looked like a scientist, such a classical intellectual, who came to write a clever book in the quiet countryside for inspiration. Jeans, plaid beer shirt, over blonde, slightly gripped hair, square glasses. He looked to be about 35 years old. Yes, there was always Snigger, Robert replied. Do you know her? In a way, the blonde man hummed. We can talk. It's okay, he said, to the receptionist, who was apparently one step away from calling security. These are my friends. Let's go. You see, I was just walking by and happened to hear a familiar name. That's what happened. Robert asked his wife, calling her by her maiden name because she kept it after the wedding. There was a little scandal about it, by the way. Wendy's mother-in-law took offense, considered it disrespectful to her son. But Robert did not insist. He understood and accepted that Wendy wanted to keep her last name. My name is Noah. The new acquaintance introduced himself. And you are? He looked questioningly at Christina. My acquaintance, Christina. Christina said, as if she were just an acquaintance, stepping next to him. After passing the hotel lobby, they entered a pretty room with an abundance of live plants. It looked like a winter garden, and they were seated in a corner behind a projecting part of the wall. Everyone on a sofa and an armchair. "How do you know my wife?" Robert was quick to ask. "She's here. You know, I've been seeing her for a while. Let's clarify a few things to prevent misunderstandings. I don't know Wendy personally, but let's just say I was familiar with her personality. In a certain sense, it's like." Robert frowned. "I don't understand." "You know, it was a big surprise to me myself to hear that she might have shown up here." Noah, taking off his glasses, took a handkerchief out of his pocket and began to wipe them carefully. "You see, I'm a psychiatrist, trained in Switzerland, and practiced there for a while. And then I decided to come here. To be more precise, I was brought here by a patient. I have been treating him for a long time, but my colleagues told me about the unexpected development of this case. Let me start in order." Noah started off by explaining that he wasn't really a foreigner. His mother was Russian, but his father was a foreigner in the full sense of the word Austrian. Then, years ago, Noah, in the course of his work, acting as a colleague and assistant to a more experienced specialist, encountered one difficult case, which turned out to be a man in his 40s named Kevin. He had come to Switzerland for work. He had a good qualification as a welder, and for a few years he worked diligently for a construction company. But then, in fact, it all started with the appeal of his employer, who was concerned about the strange behavior of his subordinate. The fact was that Kevin, previously characterized by silent network and even withdrawn, suddenly became very active in communicating with others to convey their ideas. It turned out that he decided to found his own, figuratively speaking, cult. Kevin represented himself as its leader, hereditary sorcerer, having great power in the world of spirits. The essence of the doctrine composed. Kevin was that modern man suffers a lot and lives badly, because he departed from the covenants of the ancestors and denied the unity with nature. And to be saved, it is necessary to restore all this. But the practical part, the essence of salvation, was seen not in the fact that, for example, people should treat nature more carefully, take care of their families, take care of their relatives. Not at all. First of all, he believed that it was necessary to starve, as well as absolutely obey him, because he has a connection with the spirits of nature, and he can request for them. Man has many different and good things, but above all, cleansing on an energetic level. Kevin left his job and disappeared one day, but he was quickly found. It turned out that he had moved to some local village, where, strangely enough, he found followers. But Kevin didn't live in the village itself. He moved into an abandoned cabin in the woods. The employer went to him, and in the company of local environmentalists, because this house stood on the territory of the reserve, and no outsiders were supposed to be there. And Kevin? Well, it turns out this madman got it from somewhere. Wolverine kept her in a cage as a pet, and then let her down on uninvited guests. Anyway, we didn't have a quiet conversation, and from the one that did take place, it was clear that Kevin was out of his mind. He declared himself the master of the taiga, although, strictly speaking, there was no taiga in Switzerland. That's how Kevin ended up in the local psychiatric clinic. He was declared insane. He spent several years there for treatment, and then he was deported. It's been years. Wait, Robert interrupted the narrator impatiently. But what does this have to do with my wife? You know where your wife was when she first turned 18? With a soft and sad smile, asked Noah. Well, of course I do. Then she would have started Robert, but he immediately stopped talking, thinking. She wanted to go abroad after school to study. I remember Grant telling me she won. Yeah, she was an honor student, and her parents helped with the money, and he's in over his head. She went to university in Switzerland. Yeah, we met after she got back from there. She came back very quickly. She hadn't been there 3 months. But what happened? You know, don't you? Robert looked anxiously at Noah and continued. Then Kevin went into the clinic for a reason. If he hadn't been recognized as mentally ill, he would have faced serious consequences. as a result of being charged with many crimes, including the fact that they're in the wooded abandoned cabin. It turned out he wasn't alone. The thing was that 2 months before the cult of the Master of the Taiga collapsed from one university, a girl Russian student who had come to study to be a designer disappeared. Her friend said she had gone to see the local beauty and was going to hitchhike back. They discouraged her, but for some reason she was convinced that Switzerland was a very safe country and nothing would happen to her. But as it turned out, it was this girl Wendy who was found in the gatehouse with Kevin. She was his niece, but by the time she was rescued, he had already taken the chain off her because he had achieved his goal of breaking the poor girl's psyche. The thing was that Kevin dreamed of having many wives. He said that to exchange energy with nature, he needed at least 20 young beauties, and the first was 18-year-old Wendy. But she never said anything like that. Robert exhaled in shock. I didn't know that. It's the kind of story many people prefer to forget and not share with others. Noah grinned mirthfully. Have you heard of Stockholm Syndrome? Asked Noah. Robert shook his head. It's when the victim of an ordinary kidnapping begins to sympathize with his teacher over time, to understand his motives, to feel guilty about what happened. Noah was calmly explaining to Robert the nature of the trouble. What had happened to Wendy? After her release, she spent several months in a clinic where she was helped to literally piece back together her shattered personality. And then Wendy came home. Her parents said she just changed her mind about studying abroad, saying she couldn't handle the program and decided to change careers altogether, Robert said. But why didn't she tell me anything, even after the wedding? Because it's easier to forget about this nightmare. Few people are willing to go back to it, even mentally, even if it means opening up to those closest to them, Noah said. You said your patient brought you here. Breaking the somber silence that had fallen over the small company, Christina. You were talking about Kevin or Wendy. I'm afraid. Perhaps it's about both now, Noah said thoughtfully. The thing is, Kevin's back after so many years in the doldrums. He's trying to start a cult again, but now he's just the local weirdo around here for now. It's like he's not doing anything wrong. I mean, a man has a right to believe what he wants to believe, right? But I'm afraid he'll go beyond that. I'm afraid he's even more dangerous now. And for all I know, he's here, the sanitarium. Round my eyes. Robert? No, somewhere in one of the villages around here or in the woods, Noah said. And your wife, what did you say about her coming here? Her strange behavior. Perhaps she would have heard the chase, or he contacted her himself, and he wants her back. And she wanted that too. Though I'll admit, it's all rather odd. And something else happened. It's hard to deal with. But Robert, and then talked about what they found in the apartment when they returned. Very interesting, Noah thought. But in principle it could be explained. It probably symbolizes that Wendy has decided to break with her past life, to sort of die to the world. Now I'm sure she didn't come here by accident. She's looking for Kevin. And maybe she's already found him. And tell me if she's had any major upheavals recently, any severe emotional distress. Robert. He felt uncomfortable under the doctor's piercing gaze. He hesitated, then answered, No, everything was fine. I was just away from home on a business trip and then came back. Back, he corrected cheerfully. And here we are, me and Christina, a coworker I know. We're looking for Wendy, my wife, now. I see, said Noah, and Robert had the strange feeling that Dr. Steele had looked right through him and didn't believe what he said. What do we do? Christina asked. Who do we call? Who can help us? I think right now we can and should act on our own, said Noah. After all, if right now Kevin isn't violating anything, if he hasn't kidnapped anyone else, then technically the man can do anything. So I think it's best we find him to start with. And as for your wife, I don't suppose she's here at the sanitarium. Unsure if I'd ever seen her here, I'd have noticed and remembered. Although, of course, I might have missed something. But I don't think she's here. And you know what? Is there any other place to start looking? I've been meaning to go there myself. It's the Village of Hedgehogs. What a nice name, huh? Christina smiled. When do we go? Best right now. Noah got up. I have to pack. I'll be quick. Did you have a car? No, sighed Robert. What, are you stuck in mine? I rented a car, said Noah. The road to the village was fast and easy. It had been cleaned and was in good condition. There was silence on the road. Everyone had something to think about. Christina was reflecting on the fact that she had no intention of becoming the disciple of a happy family at all, and she would never have become the mistress of a married man if he had been doing well. But Robert, after all, he had said that he and his wife had been living as neighbors for a long time, and that it was mutual, that they had no feelings. And so her affair with Robert Christina saw in the long run as something positive not only for herself, but also for Wendy. After all, after the breakup, she could certainly meet another man with whom she would be happy. And that was weird. But right now, her own former views didn't seem so right to Christina anymore for some reason. She realized that, in fact, it was a flawed idea to break into the family, no matter what Robert said. If he was already divorced, then it would be possible to make love with a clear conscience. But as it was a bad thing. Hedgehog Village had once been a thriving place, but now there are mostly old people left here and very few young people. From the sanatorium to it was a short drive of less than half an hour, and since they didn't know how long it would take, Noah suggested to Robert and Christina that they get a room at the sanatorium. Fortunately, there were rooms available, and they immediately paid for their stay for 3 days. The girl at the reception desk looked suspiciously, but did not say anything, and she gave out the keys to 2 rooms. And what to do next? Christina drummed her fingers nervously on her knee. Just knock on houses and talk to people. Luckily, I found out something, Noah said. Turns out he managed to search social media for locals and found someone. A kid named Christopher. This teenager was into computer games, but did well in school, and even won the Olympics in biology. He lived part of the time in the city with his father and mother, and for vacations he came to the village where he lived with his grandfather. I signed up with him, Noah said. The boy sought help on the internet, joined groups where young people share problems in their relationships with their parents. He's in trouble. The mother and father believed Kevin. I wrote that I was the man's former primary care physician. Christopher is a smart boy, grinned Noah. He didn't believe me right away. He demanded a scan of my diploma to confirm that I'd worked in Switzerland. He also said he wouldn't pay me any money. He'd had enough of one crook in his family. Anyway, we talked, and we're on our way to see him right now. Grandpa Christopher's house was at the very edge of the village. When the little company knocked on the gate, a huge dog came out of the box, and it was off the chain, and in fact it looked like a pure wolf. Robert shrieked with fright and almost ran away. I found a place out of the house in my slippers and threw them over my shoulders, and a skinny, tall teenager came out in a tulip. Noah, he said with a squint, approaching and opening the wicket. First time I've seen a foreigner. Nice to meet you. Noah replied with a smile and shook Bora's hand firmly. And who is that with you? Asked the young man, a little suspiciously. Psychiatrists do. Will you catch him together? Christopher's eyes lit up with excitement. Not exactly, Noah hummed and introduced his companions. Wow, said Christopher at the fact that Kevin probably had a willing captive. Let's go inside. It's frosty today, and Grandpa and I have just put the samovar on. The invitation was accepted by all with great pleasure. True, Robert was only glad to be warm, and so a piece of food was not in his throat. Christopher's grandfather, Sebastian, turned out to be a sturdy old man about 70 years old with a decent tail. He welcomed the guests cordially and took Noah very seriously, saying that they could use help with this scourge. Yeah, he was here the other day, Sebastian said. Kevin, this one, went to get him to go door to door with Stephen. That's my Christopher's father. Stephen is his father's name. You see, they wanted to talk to people. This journalist is still curious. I told them, why are you filming him? Can't you see he's crazy and you're trying to stir him up? What's it to the journalists? Are they filming themselves? I think this sectarian got Stephen drunk. And a drunk man, you know what I mean. Sebastian was coughing. You just pour ideas into his head and he's happy to carry them. Maybe he's also a hypnotist. What do you think? Sebastian looked questioningly at Noah. I'd say he has a dark charisma, but no hypnotic powers, he replied. So that makes two of them. Where do they live? Do we know? There is a version of it. Sebastian scratched his snow-white beard thoughtfully. In the woods. Back in the 90s, a businessman wanted to build a house, almost built it, but he didn't live there. He disappeared. Well, there are ruins there. I don't know how to live there, but things happen. Sectarians. The old man waved his hands. They are capable of anything. Suddenly, the door of Senya in the main room of the house ajar, and in it woke up a dog's muzzle eyes flashed yellow. Nada is a good girl. Christopher beckoned the beast with that sausage, and when she approached fearlessly sliced the treat, handed it to the toothy mouth. What an interesting breed, said Robert, to whom it seemed that besides sausage this creature was interested in something else in this room, or rather to say him. What breed? Grandfather waved his hand. Her mother ran away in the woods once, took a long walk. I was thinking of getting a new dog, but she came back and brought the only puppy she had. I think so, grinned the old man. No other way than with a wolf. She made friends. She looks a lot like the Volga she found. I took her to the vet once, and everyone in town ran away from us, even though she was wearing a muzzle. Robert was also ready to run away, and in different directions at the same time, because Nada suddenly decided to sniff him, and the expression on her face became somehow squeamish. And then he sneezed. The dog wolf grunted and muffled. She doesn't like you, Christopher said, but calmly and even cheerfully. That's all right. She doesn't like many people at all. You're her type, though, the boy added, watching Noah scratch the animal behind the ears and wag his tail. Oh, how cute. Christina smiled and took the opportunity to stroke the obvious predator. Christina snuggled up to Noah, and Robert knew it was strange and silly to feel that way. But he felt a pang of jealousy. Had he noticed that Christina was acting differently in the company of this style doctor, flirtatious or something? Could it be that? Because he's a foreigner. And there was nothing intimate between him and Christina. They hadn't really started a serious relationship, but the prick of jealousy from logical reasoning never went away. So we should go to the woods, Noah said, and maybe we can settle this quietly, without too much trouble or fuss. He had no time to speak before the door of the house behind the drums, and somehow there was a sense of urgent, pressing need for this post. Or maybe there was trouble. Christopher went to open the door, and returned a minute later with a woman in her 40s. She had a crying face and a completely insane look. And here is the victim of our #1 sectarian. Sebastian's grandfather pointed at her with both hands. My daughter. Here she is, Dr. Jenna. And we have a psychiatrist, by the way, from Switzerland, and knows your guru of 3 days, continued the old man, not hiding the snide. My daughter has already grown big, and it's too late to bring you up, but out of respect for mine, be kind enough to sit down. Listen to what the learned man has to say. You have a lot of interesting things to say about Kevin the psychopath. Sebastian turned to Noah. He was about to answer, but Jenna, having finally regained her breath, blurted out first, Daddy, I was wrong. Oh, Daddy, what a fool I was. And the woman sobbed. You sit down. Christina, please sit down. Who are you? Asked Jenna, taking the advice to sit down. An acquaintance of mine, said Robert, and I'm the husband of a woman who seems to be a prisoner of this sect again. But what's going on? Dad? Asked Jenna, wiping her nose with a handkerchief. Then Christopher briefly outlined the situation to the mother. So what happened? Where's Dad? I told you not to talk to that psycho, the teenager resented. He's like hypnotizing. And you all, that this secret knowledge will help teach you how to live. Well, I figured it out. Did you realize that? Who you messed with? And adults are smart. You on the mother, not on the gray, shook his head old man. And not such adults and smart in a hat are sometimes in sex. Jenna, you explain calmly what happened, and then we'll think together. That's what we're here for. Jenna told everything, confused and embarrassed. This woman had a good education. She'd studied at a teacher's college. Now she confessed that she simply did not understand how she could fall for all this, how she and her husband could so easily believe in all this nonsense that Kevin had. He said he knew the means to cure a man of all diseases, how to gain even immortality. He said that telepathy and many other abilities are inherent in every human being. But the modern world is not allowed to reveal this potential. But he knows how to fix it. You know, it was like an obsession. Jenna splashed her hands. It's like you're becoming a different person. And I'm so ashamed to admit it, but you kind of rise above all the other people because you know the truth. You have a mentor, I mean a master. And they are them. That is, all other people don't understand anything. They are stupid. But you realize that you were wrong. Noah gently took Jenna's hand lightly, squeezing her fingers. How did it happen? Kevin was at our house. Jenna lowered her eyes. Christopher had already left here to visit his grandfather, and my niece came over to visit. And Kevin. Anyway, I realized he was interested in her. I mean, he started talking to her all of a sudden. I realized he wanted her to believe him too. And then, wow, what a horror. Anyway, I got the girl out quickly. Told her she better go now. You know, I was just in shock. Jenna gave me a pleading look. After that, Kevin told me off. And he and my husband also started talking about how Kevin has this idea that he needs young girls to keep his body's energy balanced. He said that his followers who proved themselves faithful would also have access to girls, that he, as a teacher, would reward his faithful servants. And that's when I realized what we'd gotten ourselves into. I just can't believe my husband would go along with any of this. We had a fight with him. He said he would become Kevin's most loyal disciple. He would get younger and grow new teeth and a new liver because Kevin would teach him something. My husband said that it is impossible to interfere with him, and I am his enemy against the fact that he then, under the control of the teacher with young girls, energy magical produce. And that's when the madness became clear to me. Mom, I'm going to interrupt Dad, Christopher said, and Jenna, hearing this, shrieked softly and cried and began to say that it was wrong. After all, it's Dad, and he's just misguided. Then she added that that wasn't all. Kevin wanted the apartment signed over to him. And Jenna's husband agreed. He wrote a deed of gift for his share of half the apartment. You know, it just goes to show that in his line of work, Kevin belongs to a well-known, shall we say, type of sect leaders, Noah said. Usually, it is hardly the main thing they need from their subordinates to be given money and property. Mantis is let's be strong. Okay, said Christopher, and then turned to the others. What to do? You can't just sit around and wait to see what happens next. We gotta get this bastard. You take it easy, kid, said Robert. I understand everything, but let's not panic and no hasty decisions. If you are careful for a long time, Grandpa Sebastian said thoughtfully, the fish will eat the bait and swim away. What am I saying? I think we should visit someday. Like, right away and without any curtsies. After all, he's got at least 2 people coming out now, right? He's bent his fingers. Your wife, Robert, that's 1. And my son-in-law, that's 2. So there's a good reason we're family. So we got a right to worry about family people. It's winter. Now you understand. The sun has risen, and it's already sunny. So it's better to go in the morning. And besides, I have a friend here. He's a smart guy. He's an experienced hunter too. I'll ask him to help you. He'll be back in the village tomorrow. I'll talk to him. So we'll just wait. Robert was indignant, as long as my wife is with it. If Kevin hasn't changed much, Noah reassured him, then your wife is relatively safe. He's probably giving her very long lectures. I mean, all that nonsense about his teachings. Kevin likes to take a long time to process people he needs something from, and what he needs from my Wendy. Robert asked grimly. The same thing he needs from this family, I suppose. The psychiatrist nodded at Jenna. He just intends to take over someone else's property. Sebastian insisted that there was no need for anyone to return to the sanitarium. There was enough room in his house to accommodate everyone in a slightly cramped, but quite cozy overnight stay. Noah agreed to the proposed plan. Christina supported him warmly, and Robert once again noted how quickly she had changed the object of her affections. That is, he knew in his mind that their affair was already over, but it was still unpleasant. She could not, at least for the sake of decency, not flirt so blatantly under his nose. Robert woke up in the morning, but at an hour when it was still dark outside the window. Lying on his back, he stared at the ceiling. He could not get it out of his head that Wendy, his sweet, kind Wendy, was now at the mercy of some madman who could do anything to her. I'll wait for you, of course, he muttered quietly under his breath. Robert, rising cautiously, he realized how Sebastian would go to talk to the man in the morning. It would be a while before that hunter would be their guide. Maybe another 24 hours. Robert began to pack, and he did it quietly, because he did not want anyone to stop him. He didn't intend to wait any longer. And let this Noah, this brain-dead right-winger from Switzerland, the scholarly type. But only he, Robert, is a man and a man's man, not a wimp, to sit still if he's told to. And that's why he's gonna go and save his wife right now. End of story. Like save her, but he's gonna bash that Kevin's head in. Robert remembered what Sebastian said about landmarks. If you stick to the clearing and go strictly north, then reach the big rocks, and there turn left past the frozen lakes, there would be this house. Before leaving the house, Robert thought for a moment. Sebastian might have some kind of weapon. He could use it. But on the other hand, he had never handled one in his life. And so Robert decided to go as he quietly walked out of the yard. Nada, getting out of her fortified box, gave the man a thoughtful look, and then, unnoticed by the pursued man, followed him. Her father was a real wolf after all, and she resembled him not only in appearance, but also part of her essence. When everything happened, when the merciless reality crushed Wendy and made her feel infinitely alone and simply destroyed, she would, if only she had been allowed, have given anything for salvation, whoever offered it, and whatever the price. And in those moments when the journalist on TV was talking about Kevin, the young woman's world turned upside down a second time. It was as if she was falling in weightlessness, and at the same time frozen in the void. A past that had been forgotten came flooding back. Peace, security, calmness, detachment from the problems of the real world. For there was Kevin, who had promised to take care of her. During those weeks spent in a psychiatric clinic in Switzerland, many specialists worked with young Wendy. And how did she resist their attempts to get inside her head? She resisted what they convinced her of. That Kevin was a torturer. He had broken her mind, subjugated her will. And then she realized it all. And the release came like a breath of fresh, ice-cold air. She remembered as a doctor, one of the assistants of a gray-haired elderly professor. I think his name was Noah. He had suggested that she could stay now voluntarily, and they would continue the treatment. They would help her to be completely free of the destructive program that Kevin had planted in her mind. But then there were the parents, who demanded that her daughter must hurry back home, and she didn't need any foreign clinic. She just had to come home, and everything would be all right. And Wendy did. She refused psychotherapy, as well as special medications. She believed she could cope without all that. The years flew by. Her parents didn't like to talk about it, and she herself thought it was a shameful stain on her foolish youthful past. But now the TV screen showed Kevin's face. How had he aged, changed over the years? His quiet voice promised salvation and the joy of oneness with nature. The discovery of the great mysteries, her voice as if to strike and caress at the same time, attracted like a magnet and frightened me into madness. "I am alone," said aloud to Wendy, rising from the couch. "No one needs me. I'm lost to this world." She suddenly realized what she must do. She must go back. After all, it had been a monstrous mistake to keep them apart. And he would help her again, show her the way, protect her, open her up with his care. Wendy didn't pack for a long time, just called her mother. Then she went to the ritual store and did what the image helped her to say goodbye to her home and her old life. Then she took a bus to the village of hedgehogs. And from there, with the help of a couple of concerned people, I found Kevin's house. It was amazing. But when he opened the door, he recognized her immediately. "Wendy," said. He smiled toothlessly. "My girl, how have I missed you?" And she fell into his arms with a sob. And then the door closed, and Wendy's world turned upside down for the third time. Now she was falling into a nightmarish slump of oblivion, losing herself with every breath. The winter forest greeted Robert in what appeared to be a welcoming manner. Her feet stepped lightly through the fluffy snow, which disappeared with silver and diamond chips. There were tits and some other birds around, and even the frost barely bristled. But the sleuths. Robert cheerfully imagined finding the home of the wacky hermit, breaking in, kicking the door in with his foot. And then, but there should probably be a fight between them, like between a bad guy and a good guy in a Hollywood action movie. And then, of course, he's alive and not badly hurt. He will take his wife by the hand, say that she forgives her for everything, and they will go out of the woods together. This fantasy made me feel sweet in my chest, and for some reason, it sounded in my stomach. Yeah, I get it, Robert. It wasn't the thoughts. It was the fact that he hadn't had breakfast. He'd gone out. But it also seemed like it was rumbling in the stomach of someone who was following him or not. What was that strange sound anyway? Robert suddenly swallowed hard and turned around very slowly. Behind him stood the wolf. "Nada," he said. "Good girl." The animal cocked its head and cocked its ears and bared its fangs, as if to say that a good girl was definitely not for him, and quietly grumbled, snarling, "Nada." Robert vaguely remembered that with wolves and dogs, it seems, you can't run away with your back turned to them. He was also confused. Why was she following him? Why? Yesterday everything had been fine. However, it was still worth remembering that, according to Sebastian, in this animal genes mixed in half-pet and the age-old enemy of man, fearless wolf. And so some hustle and bustle in the woods ensued, as well as a clumsy chase, with the clumsiness in it 110% attributable to Robert. Two creatures, a man and a dog with a dash of wolf, ended up near an abandoned lodge in the woods. And actually, Robert had hoped Nada would leave soon. Really? All right. She got in her head and chased him off. But then she'd have to get back to her master. Robert remembered what Sebastian said about Nada being the smartest animal. He said he would not leave home for long. Generally very attached to the house, so I do not put on chains. But now, sitting in the gatehouse, Robert very much doubted the intelligence and kindness of this animal. And it was doubly sickening because he was stuck here, and he had to save his wife. And all the others have no idea where he had gone, and what would happen next. Robert asked himself a thoughtful question. Meanwhile, other events were unfolding in another part of the forest. "We shouldn't have done that, of course, hero. We are going to the lair to the maniac," said John and pulled warm gloves on his hands. He had just finished digging into the engine of one of the two snowmobiles. And seemed to have fixed the problem. John had known the Sebastian family intimately for a long time. He was also well aware of the fact that a strange type of sectarian propaganda was coming to his home village, so he agreed to help right away. And the only thing that embarrassed him was the haste and the fact that the small company was hardly prepared for dangerous surprises. "We are lucky," said Noah. "Kevin is mad in part, but he is rather cowardly and would hardly risk open conflict with 3 people, said Christopher indignantly. He was strictly told to stay home with Sebastian, who said he was too old for that. As for Christopher's father, he was definitely no longer Kevin either. He called Jenna early in the morning and started apologizing and saying what an idiot he was. It turned out that he had just at some point, woken up and realized what he had done. And so having got out of the forest, Stephen in general during this time managed to get to the city, and now he was staying with his parents, who lied to him that they just quarreled with his wife. But they had already made up. Stephen, of course, was asked if he had seen a girl in Kevin's house, and he said that yes, someone had come. And Kevin introduced her as an old acquaintance of his, but nothing more was known to him. Jenna, of course, hurried into town. She had to support her husband, who had finally stopped his nonsense, and she also had to consult a lawyer about how to cancel the gift written in haste and under the pressure of sectarians. Christopher flatly refused to stay, just to sit with his grandfather. He said that if necessary, he would jump out of the window and run barefooted after him. Only they won't go into the woods without him. I'm allowed. I'm an adult, he said, proudly drinking his lower lip and flashing his eyes like an angry little child. And how old are you? Asked Noah. 16. Then there are no questions, grinned the doctor. All right, you're coming with us. But promise you'll obey. Agreed. Christopher said yes, and really did what he was told, and silently rode in the second and snowmobile with John. The other vehicle was occupied by Noah and Christina. Robert's disappearance, of course, did not go unnoticed and at first even caused panic. But Sebastian made a correct assumption that he decided not to delay in rescuing his wife and went into the woods alone. And because of that, one must be in a great hurry. And then there was Nada. The old man sighed. Maybe it's after him. Why? Raised an eyebrow at Noah. Yes. Why? I know, Sebastian said. She's so smart. I'm afraid of her sometimes. Maybe she thought he needed help. I don't know, said Christopher. He's kind of scared of her. And for good reason. Our Nada is a great dog. I can confirm that, grinned John. So, smart too. Last year, when we went duck hunting together, remember, Sebastian, but we thought it was Nada who was spoiling the hunt for us, jumping and barking. But then we realized it was her leading us on. She's beckoning us to follow her. And what do you think? John, as any self-respecting storyteller, the hunter held a spectacular pause. It turns out that she was calling us to the swamp. Where have you got the moose? We barely got it out of Akatov. You think she went after Robert? Because he might need help. Christina frowned, because it sounded so fantastic. You live as long as I have. Sebastian winked. You'll believe in more than that. If you do. I don't know, but Nada's been weird lately, that's for sure. She's been going out at night, silly girl. The snowmobiles stopped near a couple of tall pine trees that had grown so close to each other that they'd become intertwined with the trunks. See, over there, John pointed ahead, where the darker is the dense, naked, gloomy thicket of bushes. That's where the house is. That's how I got the people. He patted himself on the shoulder. There is a weapon, but I will not use it. Clearly, it's a restraining device. Let's say, to keep this lunatic from coming at us. It's loaded. Careful, asked Christina. In our village, hunters don't walk otherwise. Without a smile, John replied. We not only have wolves here, but if you go farther away, you can also come across a bear on a lynx. Christina moved closer to Noah, as if unconsciously fearful of you. If we get out, I will never go into the wilderness. I'll be in the city all the time. Noah smiled at her. The city is statistically just as dangerous. And me, he added, I love nature. My parents have a chalet in the mountains. We spend every New Year's Eve there. True, Christina smiled back and flapped her eyelashes. And how is it in Switzerland in general? Beautiful. Oh. Christopher wrinkled his nose and turned to John on the sea. Grown-ups go straight to love, as if there are no other interesting things in the world. So let's get down to business, strictly and loudly urged everyone to pay attention. John, the doctor, and I will go first. Christina, hang on, behind with the boy. Oh, sorry. Generously, he winked at Bora. With Christopher Ivanovich. Not freaking out, not in a hurry. Everyone went quietly. They didn't know what to expect, and they were quite surprised that when they approached the house, it seemed as if no one was in it, or there was a fence once outlining. The yard had long since rotted away. The house itself, despite the good brickwork, gave the impression that it might collapse and fall apart at any moment. John, stepping forward, cautiously approached the windows, peered through them, and waved his hand, saying, "You may approach." Then, walking cautiously around the house, he went up on the porch and knocked on the door. Silence. Strange, Noah said. Maybe he's not here anymore. Maybe he decided to settle somewhere else. Or what? Or he didn't have time to finish, because from inside the house came a sound, a muffled, suppressed, full of agony groan. "Let me," John, putting his hand on the door, gently pushed it open. It was not locked. Then, taking a flashlight from his belt, turned it on and initiated inside. Inside the house had managed to stand everything, but it was clear. Not so long ago, a fireplace had been stoked here, or rather, a fire had been built in what was left of the fireplace in the entrance hall of the house, and the room that opened right behind it was in disrepair. But it was also clear that a man had lived here. Some of the dust had been wiped off. There was a relatively new mattress on the floor and some food on the table by the window. Kevin called out to Noah quietly, but with amazement, and the small company rushed to one corner of the room, where what they had at first taken for a mountain of old rags turned out to be a man who had plunged into anything, apparently putting on all the clothes he had. Noah didn't remember his patient's face well, because he had been working at another clinic for the past few years. But now, having finally met the man whose face he had seen in a recent journalist's program, he realized it was definitely him. And in general, Dr. Steele had never been one of those psychiatrists who confidently made a diagnosis on first impression. But now, looking at this man, he could tell Kevin was sick, and the insanity of his former patient was now far more severe than what he and his colleagues had encountered when they had tried to treat the same man in the Swiss clinic. Kevin sat back into a sort of pathetic tangle and wrapped his arms around himself. His gaze darted hysterically from side to side. He looked as if through the people who had come in and whispered something. What he was muttering, Christopher asked, "Should I punch him?" The bastard decided to take the apartment. "I can understand your anger." Noah literally intercepted the already raised fist of the teenager, but right now you have a sick man in front of you. He doesn't even seem to be aware of the reality around him. And as for his speech, the doctor frowned. He seems to be afraid of the wolf. Yes, he says the wolf comes at night and dances around the house. He says the forest rejects his former master and wants to destroy him. "I don't understand," frowned John. "And just yesterday, this psycho was bragging about how cool he was. And now he's sickening to look at. He's a miserable man, and he looks like a complete psycho. We have such a character in our village, Vaska. When he's on a white fever, he's more normal. Kevin, can you hear me?" Noah, taking a miniature flashlight out of his pocket, shone it into the eyes of the former ambitious sect leader. "He's not well at all. I don't understand what could have changed his condition so dramatically. The human psyche, it's incredibly complex and malleable. But he needs to be admitted to a regular hospital immediately. He's clearly hypothermic and dehydrated. And of course, we need to contact the local psychiatrists. I'll tell them what happened to him during his treatment with us. And from there, he'll be their concern." John and Noah, with a shoulder to lean on, got him out of the house. Then they began to decide how to drive the snowmobiles back with some problematic load, but somehow they squeezed and accommodated him. Robert decided he'd had enough. He felt disgusted. He had pushed his wife into the arms of madness, and now he was powerless. He couldn't save her and left it to others. A few hours spent in the gatehouse, when he barely managed to start a fire. It was good that he found matches in his pocket. This Sebastian's grandfather had given him when they were going into the woods. Those few hours had proved to be the perfect time to think hard about everything. And now Robert had had enough. John swung the door open with determination and stepped outside. "Nada," he shouted, "I don't know why you don't like me so much, but I'm sorry, but I'm not afraid of you. And if you want to attack me, go ahead, but I'm still going after my wife." The last words Robert barely whispered over the rustling of bodies, because he nearly fell over immediately, because right in front of him, with one hand down on the beast, stood Wendy with her hair shot up in crumpled clothes, and with Wendy's eyes glittering feverishly. Robert swallowed hard. Suddenly, he remembered the legends and tales of the spirits of the forest that could take on different guises. "Wendy, I didn't cheat on you. I swear. I didn't do anything with Christina. I couldn't. Wendy, darling." The words came pouring out. Robert felt like he was in a dream. She was real. He was real. But as Wendy stepped toward him, the snow softly crunched beneath her feet, and then she threw herself at him tightly, hugged him tightly, and sobbed. He hugged her back. "Everything will be all right," Robert said. And there was nothing else he wanted to say right now. Questions and answers, explanations and confessions and promises and forgiveness could and would have to wait. And now it was time to get out of the woods, and without mittens, Robert said. "Lost, yes," smiled Wendy as she ran away from the ghosts of the past. "Did you lose it too?" "Yes," nodded Robert as he ran away from the wolf. "Isn't that a dog?" Wendy's eyes widened. "A nice, kind dog." "Yeah," hummed Robert. Wendy looked with interest at the Nada, who suddenly turned and asked to go somewhere behind the trees. Then she stopped and turned around, as if inviting people to follow her, and they followed. And now Robert was no longer afraid. Wood crackled peacefully in the fireplace, and the amber ruby flames filled the room warmly and cozily with furniture and Christina. Robert and Wendy sat on the rug in front of the fireplace, staring into it and silent. A snowstorm had developed outside the window. Since the day they had met in the woods and Nida had led them out, it had been exactly a year. And what kind of year had it been? It was a magical 12 months that their lives changed forever. Yes, when the initial emotions subsided, they had a serious conversation. Robert confessed that he had an affair on the side and was ready to accept any decision of his wife, and even expected that there would be a divorce. After all, he was well deserving of it. But Wendy said she wanted to give them a second chance and try to start over. But back in those days, Robert and Wendy were concerned about more than just their relationship. They had many other issues to work out. So Wendy told about what had happened then in the abandoned house between her and Kevin. And it turns out they were just talking about the magnet. A strange beggarly fascination. This kind of return to the past quickly left Wendy, and she wanted to leave. But Kevin was against it. He demanded that she stay. He said she was certainly too old for him, but he had no intention of letting her go. Wendy, in those moments, already suddenly realizing what a mistake she had made, fell into a strange state. It was as if she had relived the horror and confusion that had seized her 10 years ago, when she had been rescued from the captivity of that madman. Stephen, by this time, was gone. This man in general quickly realized how misguided he had been in his supposed teachers and guides, to oneness with the natural world. And when Wendy and Kevin were finally alone, they were talking. And somehow it happened that the thread of the conversation, figuratively speaking, was suddenly in Wendy's hands. Wendy suddenly starts yelling at Kevin and saying how much she hates him. So he broke her life. She told how much it had cost her to feel human again, how she had tried to start a normal family, to live a normal life. "I made a mistake then. I let you break me," Wendy screamed. "And now how come? I thought I was alone. And you're the only one who can help me, but you can't. You're nothing but a worthless old fool. You're a madman." They were talking at the window of the old house, and suddenly Nada appeared outside the window. Kevin began to convince Wendy that she was wrong. Because here is an example in the forest. There are wolves, scary beast. And only he, Kevin, can protect her from them. Wolves? Wendy laughed. It's just a dog. Wolves don't look like that. What are you? An old madman. You've never seen a real wolf. An argument ensued. And Wendy said she would go right out to the animal and not do anything to it. Kevin begged her not to. But Wendy came out of the house, saying it was just a dog from the village. Probably let it off the chain. So she ran in here. And when she freely stood in front of Nida and stroked her behind the ear, Kevin broke down. After that, Wendy went back into the house. She decided to wait until morning because it was already night. And they talked again, or rather, Wendy talked. She talked about her life, about how she had tried to find happiness, how wrong she had been, unable to build a decent relationship with her husband. Anyway, it was a very long monologue. She just needed to vent. So you're saying that Kevin, that he's lost his mind? I mean, he's completely freaked out just because my wife talked to him. Noah, Robert asked in amazement. Dr. Steele replied that the mind of a madman like Kevin has a bizarre structure. And yes, apparently, he just couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand the fact that his victim had grown stronger after years, had started to live a normal life. And even now, having come to him again and voluntarily, suddenly found the strength to resist his influence. After all, before that, all those whom Kevin had allowed close to him, they had obeyed him. And it should not have been ruled out, by the way, that he was abandoned by another man, Stephen. Basically, Kevin was shattered by the fact that he realized he had lost his power over people. He's not the same person he used to be, and he couldn't take that kind of humiliation from himself. Robert and Wendy would have wanted to stay out of it, but they watched what happened next and breathed a sigh of relief when they learned that Kevin had ended up in an insane asylum. But not in Switzerland. Stephen, by the way, managed to successfully revoke the deed of gift. He just took it with him when he left Kevin and burned it. Christina apologized to Wendy and soon quit the firm, moved to another city and later sent word, met a man there and married. Noah, on the other hand, returned home to Switzerland where he continued his practice. Before that, he talked to Wendy and expressed his admiration for the fact that, despite such a difficult past, she had found the strength to move on and fight for her happiness. But the highlight of the last year was when Wendy managed to get pregnant. Doctors said that it is a quirk of the body, in which something has adjusted itself. And now Robert and Wendy were enjoying a vacation in one cozy country holiday home. They were looking at the fire, holding hands, and just being happy. They were very happy.
Subscribe and click the bell.
Happy graduates came on the stage. They were given certificates. Girls were given flowers and boys were given small gifts. Dear graduates, Clara, smiling ingratiatingly, took under her arm a handsome 40-year-old man in a dark, expensive suit who entered the hall. Tonight would not be possible without our dear sponsor, Christian Wilson. Let's welcome him. Flowers and gifts for our graduates, provided by his firm. She was the first to applaud, led him to a place of honor among the guests, and sat down next to him. Pay attention to that girl over there. Nodded the director of the orphanage to the stage. Pretty, relaxed, the pride of our orphanage, a pleasant conversationalist can do a lot. Take a closer look. Not bad. Quietly replied Wilson, appraising, looking at the graduate. But it's not the same. I'm tired of pretty faces in their 18, already gone through fire and water. I want a clean girl, not spoiled. She should be rustic, knave, but smart. I asked for a modest, simple girl, preferably pretty. Isabella Davis is invited to the stage. The hostess has announced. Who's that? Squinting, the man asked, scrutinizing the girl, who, smiling embarrassedly, approached the host. How come I've never seen her before? Well, Clara hesitated. She's so unassuming you wouldn't even look at her if it weren't for graduation. She's pretty sure, but she's very modest. She's a headache. Believe me, she can't do anything. She's hardly interesting to you as a woman. Clara got nervous. Trouble is, I thought she wouldn't notice Isabella. I had dressed her in a low-colored outfit, but the devil had noticed. The headmistress was upset because of the pupil. She loved her maternally and did not want the fate that was prepared by the dear guest. I'll decide who I'm interested in and who I'm not. Wilson cut her off abruptly. Just such a type, the limit of my dreams. Did you hide her on purpose? He looked suspiciously at the director. Don't disappoint me. You know I don't tolerate games behind my back. I thought that little gray mouse couldn't be the centerpiece of your house. How can she be dignified at social gatherings? She'll embarrass you. Believe me, she'll bring you grief. Meanwhile, the festivities are over. Christian, Clara have secluded themselves in the principal's office. I'm taking Isabella away from you. In an expensive leather armchair, the man said. I liked her right away. Listen. Clara frantically searched for a reason to refuse. She's just a girl, naive, unintelligent, but what if I sent Lisa with you? She's a quick-witted, skillful girl. I think she's closer to you than Isabella. I'm afraid she'll disappoint you. Clara was not in vain nervous. Her guest was a lover of young girls who had just finished school. The woman realized that, despite the unruly, cocky character, Isabella will not be able to fight back. Don't be so shaky. Christian grinned. Your son is safe as long as you honor our arrangements. Yes, I'll do as you say. I'm glad we understand each other. The man smiled sweetly and threw some bills on the table. This is for you to ease your conscience. I didn't realize you were so sentimental. If you care so much about this Isabella, it means I didn't make the wrong choice. He left, and Clara sat down at the table, dropped her head on her hands, and fell silent. What a scoundrel! What a lecher! She muttered to herself. I am good. I could not defend the girl. My heart is not in place. I am so worried about Isabella. But what can I do? 2 dear people are at stake, and yet my son's freedom is more precious. The way things are, I can't let my child go to prison. And Isabella, God forgive me, I'm a sinner. In the morning, Clara went to the dining room where the inmates were having breakfast. Isabella, come here, please. Yes, Clara. Trustingly, looking into the eyes of the director, the girl replied. The woman looked away, uncomfortable with the upcoming conversation, but Wilson cornered her. And what are those people in strict suits doing here? Who are they waiting for? Isabella asked, entering the principal's office. Isabella, the woman paused. There was a struggle going on inside her, but she knew that the mother would win and the principal would fulfill the wish of the man who sponsored all the big events at the orphanage. I'm very happy that you graduated from high school. You are the pride of this year's graduating class. I know you have big plans for your future, but you will have to put them on hold. Why? The girl looked at the principal, puzzled. Wilson is waiting for you at his house. Wilson? Our guest from yesterday? Clara nodded. She was visibly nervous. Why does he need me? I don't understand. What don't you understand? The headmaster suddenly shouted in a trembling voice. Didn't you hear anything about him from our girls' graduates? He liked you. I've heard something in passing. Isabella slowly began to realize what had been said. But I don't like him. I don't want to go out with him. One of the girls wanted to go to his house. I don't remember. Let them go in my place. I don't want to be his concubine. You can't refuse. Tiredly said Clara. He won't give up. If anything, He's made up his mind. I'm not going to go to him. You have no right to force me." The girl rushed to the door, swung it open. The exit was blocked by stout young men. They stared silently at Isabella, ready to twist her at any moment if necessary. She slammed the door shut and turned to the principal. "How can you do this to us? I mean, he's old. Have you sold out for money? You don't understand anything." Clara, nervously biting her lips, wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to keep warm. "He's a scary man and I'm on the hook for him. A few years ago, he saved my son, got him out of jail, my boy's freedom. That's the trump card Wilson is using, and I'm powerless. I can't fight back. He's blackmailing me. One day you'll be a mother, and you'll realize you'd sell yourself to the bald man for your child to be happy. So there's no chance of me getting out of here. Those are his guards at the door. I wanted to spare you from that fate, but he wanted someone just like you. He said he wanted a naive, modest girl, and God gave you beauty and intelligence to ruin. How many girls did he have in his collection? You're the fourth. And where did they go? Do you know what happened to them after they were in the hands of this Wilson?" I don't know anything about their fate." Clara looked pityingly at Isabella. "I haven't tried to find out. So you send 18-year-old girls to a grown man and just forget about their fate. How's that? Doesn't it make you feel bad?" I'm sorry. Tears came to the woman's eyes. They agreed at once. No one resisted. She grasped Isabella's hand and spoke eagerly. If I could stop him, but my son's freedom is in his hands. You will understand me when you are a mother yourself. You'd better accept it. He won't back down. He's a scary man. He'll stop at nothing. Even if I tried to report him to the police, he'd get away with it. It's all been bought." Isabella stood for a moment, looking into the headmaster's eyes. In them, except fear and entreaty, she read nothing else, then pulled her hand out of the hands of Claire, abruptly opened the door and said loudly, "Well, if there's no escaping fate, let's take it as it comes. Let's go, boys." Isabella was returning from school, not far from the house, noticed her grandmother, caught up with her mother, who leaned with her back against the fence, sat looking at the surrounding with meaningless eyes. The girl slowed her step and stopped. Well, stood up like a stumbling block. Vanessa shouted, "Help your mother to the bed. I can't do it alone. You see, she's drunk again. Lord, when will it all end? Make sense of my foolish daughter. When will you get drunk on this vodka?" Isabella obediently came and took her mother under her arm, but she couldn't hold her and dropped her on the ground. "Oh, you bastard!" Grandmother hit her, dry fist in the shoulder. Quite sensitively, the girl wrinkled from the pain. "You can't hold your mother. Hold her tight." The two of them dragged the mother to the bed. You didn't watch her again. The old woman scolded her granddaughter. "I told you not to let her out of the house. I was at school. How could I watch her?" Justified the girl. "We left the house together in the morning. She said she went to work." "What kind of job?" "She was fired last week. What am I going to do with them?" The old woman cried. "Both of them and their husbands drink like crazy, and you can't help them. Did you go for bread?" "No, I didn't have time. I'll be right back." Isabella ran out of the house, afraid she'd get another beating from her grandmother. "Isabella," a neighbor met her. "There's your father lying by the store. You should pick him up." The girl hurried to the store. Her father was lying on the side, sleeping soundly. "Daddy." Isabella shook him by the shoulder. "You won't wake him up." Some man said confidently, "And how can I bring him home?" The girl was confused. "Don't be sad. We'll help you." The man bent down, pulled her father by the arm and put him on the ground, then picked him up, threw him on his shoulder and dragged him. Isabella ran after him. Receive. Entering the house and breathing heavily, the stranger spoke. He carefully lowered his heavy burden onto the couch, straightened up, took a breath, and left. Where did you find him? Vanessa asked, making her father comfortable on the couch. Outside the store, he was asleep. The man volunteered to help. I didn't even ask. The world is not without kind people. Did you buy bread? The old woman caught on. No, I had to come back because of my father. You wretch! The grandmother swung and pulled on her granddaughter's back with the towel she held in her hands. Isabella quickly rushed into the store. What are you going to kill Isabella for? A neighbor showed up on the doorstep. You're out of control. Granny grumbled. No wonder. Parents who do not dry out for a day. The child is not needed at all. Somehow she's still studying well. Another girl in her place would have abandoned everything long ago. Yes, it's a pity about the girl. The neighbor lamented. You should caress her. The girl lacks love and affection. One day she won't be able to stand it and will do something. That's why we have to keep a tight grip on her, so that she grows up strictly, or else she'll go down a crooked path like her parents. Wash the floors. She told her granddaughter when she returned from the store. You've trampled here. I have no strength left. Okay, Grandma. The girl obediently took a bucket and a rag. You're driving the girl crazy. The neighbor reproached the grandmother. She doesn't hear a kind word from you. Is it her fault that both parents have gone crazy? None of your business. The old woman replied glumly. I can't cope alone, and parents are of little use. You should take pity on her. The friend lamented. But what is the use of that pity? Then she will thank me for teaching her everything. The mother should be an example, but not fate. Both of them should be deprived of parental rights. I don't think so. It's better to live at home with them than in an orphanage. The neighbor shook her head disapprovingly and went away. Grandma, can Cindy come to my birthday party? Isabella asked one day. She was going to be 13 in 2 days. Think about it. Where are you going to invite guests? Grandma frowned. Parents won't let them stay. They just want an excuse to get drunk. Then you'll be embarrassed. We'll lock ourselves in my room. No one will hear us. Please, Grandma. All right, Vanessa muttered. Just don't tell your parents. Maybe you'll get away with it. I'll make you something tasty. The grandmother hoped in vain that the mother would not remember about her daughter. She came in the evening with a bottle of wine. Set the table. She ordered her mother, shaking her hand, pouring vodka into a glass. Would you not spoil the party, Isabella? Asked the older woman. She has a guest. I have the right to drink to my daughter's health, and you are not my order. I gave birth to her. That's a good reason to have another drink. I drink with my own money. I'm not borrowing it from you. Can I have an appetizer? You'd better replace the electric stove. The wire's getting hot. It's not a bad thing. You're always dissatisfied with something. Angrily said the woman. You need, you buy, but I have no money. When I get a job, then everything will be. But until then, do not bother me. You and your husband will always have money for vodka. Vanessa grumbled, serving a simple appetizer. Isabella and her friend sat in the room for a while, watched cartoons, played, and went home. The girl was glad that her mother did not make a scandal like last year when Isabella invited her friends, and in no way expected that her mother would come home drunk from work and roughly disperse the whole company. The girl at that moment was ready to fall to the ground with shame. In the morning, she kissed her grandmother and ran off to school. Do not delay. I'm boiling borscht. with your favorite garlic buns." The old woman shouted after her, "Okay, Grandma." The day was going great. Isabella was in a hurry to get home. She was walking, facing the spring sunshine, and humming a cheerful song to herself. Wow! Approaching the house, suddenly noticed Isabella. An uneasiness stirred in her soul. Was there a fire? There were people in the street, cars, ambulances, firemen. "Do you know who has a fire?" She asked a woman who was trying to see what was going on up ahead. "Isabella." The neighbor looked at her fearfully. "Your house is on fire." "How?" The girl was dumbfounded and rushed through the crowd. "Where?" Someone called her and tried to hold her back. Don't go to the ashes, stop. Let me go, my mom's there." They grabbed her, held her down. She started to break free. "Grandma, Daddy, let me go. Why are you standing there?" "We have to save her." She screamed, trying to break free from the tight embrace. "I have to go to them." "Isabella, they're dead." A man's strong arms shook her. "You can't go in there, do you hear me?" "They're gone." "Yes, they are." "Why are you standing there?" "Why aren't you helping?" "They can't be dead." "Don't you understand?" "They're out there. I'll find them." "Let me go, please." The girl suddenly weakened, slipped out of my arms, sat down on the grass and wept. She raised her head to the sky. "Mommy." The soul-crushing scream rose above the flames and vanished into the sky. Everyone standing around her was heartbroken by the cry. Women wiped their tears with handkerchiefs, men gritted their teeth, and looked sympathetically at the little girl's grief. People were quietly talking among themselves, watching the fire being doused. Suddenly it flared up, and I looked, and it was going up in flames. No one escaped. The firemen came quickly, but there was nothing they could do. They flooded to keep the flames from spreading to other buildings. Do we know what caused it? The cops said it was faulty wiring. Vanessa complained that the electric stove was sparking, but who'd listen to her? All dead. Good thing the girl was at school, or she would have been too. Why did the ambulance come? They thought they could save someone, but there. What a grief! I feel sorry for Isabella. Now she'll go to an orphanage. The girl sat in the grass and stared blankly at the house, tears running down her cheeks. She could not understand that she was left alone, without a home, without relatives. "Come on, sweetheart." Someone lifted her up. "There's no reason for you to sit here. Come and stay with us until the child welfare authorities get here. You must be hungry. Grandma promised me borscht." Swallowing tears, quietly said the girl, "Poor you? Poor orphan. How unlucky you are." The neighbor shook her head. Isabella followed her obediently. Her strength to cry was gone, and there was a persistent smell of burning in her nose. She collapsed on the offered sofa, curled up in a ball under the blanket, and cried quietly. "No, I don't believe it. It can't be. Mom, Dad, and the always nagging Grandma. There is no one. How can I go on living?" "You cry, sweetheart." An old woman stroked her head. "You'll feel better. God willing, everything in life will get better." She sighed heavily. The girls were fidgeting in front of the mirror, trying on dresses for the graduation ceremony. The exams were finally behind them. Isabella looked dreamily at her reflection. "I thought they would never end. Now we are free. You see, no tutors, no scheduled breakfasts, no getting up, no going to bed, but life will begin. Isabella, you're so beautiful." The girlfriend did not take her admiring eyes off the girl. "You'd say so too." Isabella looked at herself in the mirror. "I can't believe we've known each other for only 5 years. "Yes," she laughed. "It seems like a lifetime." She ran over to Kelly and hugged her tightly. You know, as strange as it sounds, I'm glad you ended up in our orphanage. I was always jealous. You're lucky to remember your parents. Yeah, lucky. I just remember them, always drunk. I never even knew mine. Do you remember when we were friends? Of course I remember. And Isabella got sad. The ritual, the new girl's registration. Everyone was laughing, and I was on the floor with a broken nose. You were the only one who stood up for me. From that day on, no one ever tried to mess with you again. Of course, because you fought like a tiger. Isabella laughed. I'm sorry we have to break up. I'll miss you. But we'll correspond. We'll return phone calls. I'll definitely come visit as soon as I get settled, and you come too. You finally decided to go to modeling school. Haven't you changed your mind? Well, can you imagine what awaits you there? Yes, the girl dreamily spun around the room. It's not for nothing that I earned my portfolio. Tried to participate in all the events. I hope they'll help me get through the competition. Yeah, with your looks, you could be an actress, not just a model. Juliet would be amazing in your performance. In our amateur talent show, you're unrivaled. Don't exaggerate. Isabella was embarrassed by the flattery. We have a lot of talented kids here. Thanks to her, my literacy is invisible. She made me participate in all Olympiads and events. Lucky you, Isabella. You know what you want to get out of life? Well, Isabella hugged her friend. Why are you so sad? We'll be fine, and you'll find yourself. Shall we go to the auditorium? They're giving out diplomas now. They say Wilson has prepared such presents for us. I can't wait to see them. The girls went to the auditorium that were already in full swing handing out certificates. Look, whispered in my friend's ear. Wilson here at the age, and yet nothing like that. Attractive and in good shape, his peers have long since grown their bellies, and this one is watching himself, and still that walker, not a single beautiful woman will not miss. The girl laughed, and still not married. I'd like to see the one he will marry. Who is she, anyway? Isabella asked, looking at the tall, broad-shouldered man with the piercing look in his blue eyes. You're crazy. The girl was surprised. This is the local patron of the arts. Everything we have in the orphanage is his merit. He gave us a computer class last year. Look at him. He's very handsome. Many of our girls have a crush on him. Uh-huh, agreed Isabella. But it's old. What do they see in it? You don't know anything about men. At this age, they are at their best. And what does it matter how old he is? Hotly whispered in her ear friend. If he has money, chickens do not peck. Anybody with him, like behind a stone back, a dream, not a man. How do you know? Isabella looked at her friend suspiciously. We're waiting for Isabella Davis. The girlfriend suddenly heard. Go. Isabella pushed Isabella, the girl. It's your turn. Imagine you're on the runway. Show everyone what the first beauty of our orphanage should look like. Let them gasp at your attractiveness. The girl walked to the stage. Returning to her seat, she felt the stares on her. Wilson was looking at Isabella in a way that made her uncomfortable. Why is he looking at me so strangely? She thought, and shivered under the predatory gaze of his blue eyes. It's like he's undressing me. I wouldn't want to be alone with him. Huh? She restrained herself. I thought, why would he want me? But Isabella was not mistaken. Christian was staring at her with a greedy gaze. I must have her. The man thought, gazing at the girl. Very nice. He smiled, satisfied, anticipating a night in the arms of the young beauty. Isabella felt uncomfortable, in the company of 3 scowling, taciturn men. Where are we going? The girl could not bear the long silence, trying not to show how frightened she was. Christian's country house. The man was silent. If you behave well, the owner will not offend. He likes obedient young ladies. The men laughed. It depends on what he expects from me. The girl thought to herself. One thing is clear, there's no point in begging him to let me go, and I'm not going to snot. Rose-colored glasses also long ago removed. I understand, not tea drinking invited. The only thing left is to accept the situation as it is, and then think how to get out of it. It's okay, I'll be able to stand up for myself. If you cannot escape from fate, you must take a chance, try to get out of poverty, so that no Wilson in the future no longer dare to drool at the sight of me and offer all sorts of abominations. I'm strong, I can handle this old man who likes young girls. I'll make him dance to my tune. I won't give up so easily. He doesn't expect to get me on a silver platter. Life in an orphanage had taught me a thing or two. And yet Isabella was scared, her heart clenched uneasily from the unknown. Here we are, the driver announced, stopping the car in the yard of a huge country house. Come. The guard opened the door in front of her. Christian is waiting. If you'll be good, you'll even like to be his guest. The man laughed, casting an expressive glance at her gorgeous body. Isabella entered the Wilson house and looked around in a hostess-like manner. Quite an environment, she thought. Plenty of room to spread out. Her courage was ostentatious. She tried not to think about what awaited her in the house. Isabella! Christian, opening his arms, went to meet his guest. I'm glad you agreed to accept my invitation. I'm honored. You may not believe me, but when I saw you on stage, I realized that this is the woman I have dreamed of all my life. You captured my heart from the very first minute. I promise you won't regret coming here. As I approached her, I grabbed her in his arms and began to cover her with passionate kisses. Christian. Isabella let him kiss her, and then slipped out of his embrace. Is that any way to welcome a guest? Especially a woman. She smiled slyly, though her insides trembled with fear and loathing. The man stared at her, puzzled by the question. What do you mean? Where are the flowers, the champagne? I was imagining a romantic candle at dinner, and you immediately kiss. I didn't expect to take a complete stranger without foreplay. I'm told you're a skillful lover. We should get to know each other a little first, and save the best for later. I agree, the bouquet and confection period in our case is a little irrelevant, but still I wanted to prepare for the main event of the night. Yes, he mumbled something under his breath. I wasn't thinking. It's a very important day. I'm entering adulthood. You're my first man, and I'd like it to be beautiful. Why are you in such a hurry? I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. What are you doing? Eh? She playfully poked him in his slightly bulging belly with her finger. Did you want to save money on me? Or did you want to get me in bed right away? Is that really all you can offer me on a first date? She was on the edge of her seat, fear of the unknown forcing her to act brazenly. Isabella grabbed his tie, pulled him toward her. She didn't think that such an experienced lover would decide to dispense with the love game. The girl wrapped the tie around her fist. Christian blushed. It became hard for him to breathe. You witch, barely catching his breath? The man wheezed. This has never happened to me before. I like you, and I want you now. He suddenly grasped her slender wrists and yanked her sharply toward him. He forcefully put her on his lap and tried to kiss her, one hand holding her down, the other hand running under her blouse and squeezing her breasts. How hot you are, a delicate, innocent flower. Let's go to the bedroom. I am overwhelmed with desire to possess you. "Ah, you old lecher!" Isabella shrieked and slapped him hard. "What are you doing, bitch?" Christian howled and grabbed his cheek. Taking advantage of the confusion, the girl jumped to her feet and ran a safe distance away from the excited man. She stopped by the hotly burning fireplace and grabbed a poker. "Don't come near me. I'll defend myself. Don't expect to get away with this." Wilson hissed, rubbing his cheek, hot with fire. "You seem to have forgotten where you are and why you're here. Don't make me angry. I can take you by force right now. Don't play with me or you'll regret it." "I don't want to," she shouted, looking at him with a burning, feverish gleam in her eyes. "How do you want it, my dear?" He smirked. "Rose petals in bed? Light music? Soft whispers and poetry reading until morning? I'm past that age. I prefer to spend my time making love. That goes without saying, but not now." The girl sat in the chair across from Christian. "I propose a wager." "A wager?" Christian's eyes widened. "Do you realize who you're offering this to?" Isabella remembered a conversation with a friend who said that Wilson was a gambler. "Yes," the girl declared defiantly. "You're a gambler, but if you sleep with me, what's the interest? In a week at the most, you'll be satiated and kicked out of the house. Thank you if you'll pay for the first night in bed with a virgin." "Naturally, I'll thank you." Insert man. "No woman would accuse me of being stingy. Money, jewelry, I am a generous lover." "That's understandable, but I suggest you entertain yourself in another way. Admit it. Do all your days resemble one another?" "Perhaps. Christian is wary. You boast that women never complain about you. I've heard that many try to get your attention and swear eternal love just for the money. You buy women, change them like gloves, and not one has ever said she loved you out of her heart and not for wealth. Yes, everyone's happy to be in your bed. I don't see where you're going with this, do you?" Wilson frowned. He was beginning to be annoyed by this willful girl. "But I'm not one of them, and you're not my type. That's not the kind of man I've seen around me." Isabella paused meaningfully. "But if you manage to make me love you, I will become yours without any additional conditions. Do what you want with me then, and when I get bored, you can throw me out on the street. And the second condition? But if you yourself fell in love with me to unconsciousness, then I will still become yours, but only through the registration of marriage. You will make me your lawful wife, with all the consequences." Wilson laughed out loud. "Do you know that I never lose? We'll see about that." The girl grinned. "Don't hope that the problem is so easy to solve. But I still don't understand. What is the bet?" "You'll be mine either way." He accepted her game. She hooked him, and the excitement of the gambler flared up in him. He liked the girl more and more. That's true, but everything must be consensual, without coercion. Those are the only terms we'll agree to with you. Do you agree? To hell with you. Wilson waved his hand. But now I want to make love to you. I've already put this moment off for too long. I didn't bring you here for a heart-to-heart. He made an attempt to get closer to her. No. Isabella gestured for him to stop. Nothing can happen between us now. You yourself agreed to my proposal. For the rest of the bet, no bed. We agreed to make love consensually. Are you ready to sign off on your own loss? That doesn't sound like you. So now we're going to separate rooms and that's it? Of course. Isabella explained impatiently, like an unreasonable child. That's the point of our pact, to fall in love for real. And then either you get me or I get you. And at the end of the bet, we'll have a long married life. You won't lose anything at all. You'll only get me a little later. But you'll taste the victory when it's over. An unforgettable night in the arms of a virgin. What, Mr. Wilson, is it weak? Squinting, the girl asked. Not a bit. The man replied defiantly. How long do you suggest? 3 months. How? Enough time and your experience of seduction, young fools, to win my heart? Or have you already lost your youthful vigor? That you can't do anything but skim off the cream by sleeping with an innocent girl. And I thought I was an alpha male, a heroic lover. But in reality, alas, a banal suitor, unable to give pleasure to a woman. You know how it hit a nerve. The man was sure of his victory. Wait, you'll still be at my feet, lying at my feet, begging for love and tenderness. He thought, you'll be begging me not to leave you. Well, the offer is tempting. Christian said slowly, my life has lacked spice. The reward for the tedious 3-month wait will be an unforgettable night with you. Without doubting my success, the more I really won't lose anything. Just 3 months and you're mine. So, do we have a deal? Isabella held out her hand to the man. Deal. He shook it with his strong hand. And you yourself will be able to endure 3 months? The girl was silent. You won't. Isabella grinned to herself. I'll never love you, and I'll never be your lover. I'm not likely to win over a man so adept at lovemaking. I just need to buy time, and then I'll decide what to do next. Little fool, you don't know I've never lost a game in my life. Wilson thought, looking at the girl with eyes darkened with passion. With what pleasure he would now undress her and show her what he could do. But he decided to see what would come of the bet. And you agreed to her terms? Laughed at him Buddy when Christian, over a shot of cognac, a few days later told him about the pair. Yes, I agreed to endure these months. It's worth it. You don't realize how seductive she is, and you hope she'll fall in love with you. I do. Arrogant, Wilson declared. You know I'm an expert in female psychology. In a month at the most, she will surrender to the mercy of the winner, and I will triumph, having gained power over this little girl who thinks herself a seductress of men's hearts. In fact, I'll be her first man. Christian? His friend looked at him suspiciously. Have you fallen in love with your prisoner? Even if I do, the man said evasively, the reward will not be long in coming. She's still mine. And you're ready to take her to register the marriage? That would be fun. Wilson laughed, but I haven't decided whether I'm ready to give up my freedom for another pretty face. Although I must say she is clever. Isabella, however, has hit a nerve, Christian. Hoping to knock her down with the romance of a summer evening, he decided to organize a fancy dinner on his yacht. She wouldn't be able to resist. He told the captain, no matter how hard she tries to play hard to get, she will not be able to remain indifferent to a ride on a luxury boat. I'm sure. The captain smiled understandingly. She will reciprocate. No frills, he ordered the chef. A girl from the orphanage will feel uncomfortable. Champagne, appetizers, fruit, dessert. I got it, Christian. Anything else? Captain, have the deck decorated with balloons and musicians. I want some light music. We'll walk along the coast. The girl will love it. I got it. Captain trumped. Should we count on a night? No. For 3 to 4 hours, I think for the first time is enough. She will dance with joy. The man grinned. What has she seen in her orphanage? Let her see how rich people live. I hope she'll appreciate my impulse. No one has ever been indifferent to an evening spent on a yacht. I think she'll be no exception. The night before the party, Wilson checked everything, made sure his orders were followed exactly. Isabella, I want to invite you to dinner. The man expected that the girl would be interested in his proposal, but she looked at him indifferently and said, But I do not understand you. rich, ready to spend money left and right. Don't know where to put it? Give it to charity. Why go out when I've made a nice dinner at home? I'm a pretty good cook, don't you think? It's not just any dinner. Barely containing his irritation, Christian said, I'm taking you for a walk along the river. Yes, Isabella couldn't hide her interest. But then that changes everything. She jumped to her feet. I'm ready. You're going to go in that. The man was surprised, looking at her worn jeans and stretched t-shirt. Why, it's not like we're going to a restaurant. Pretending to be a fool, the girl replied, and then she laughed. Relax, Christian. Give me half an hour and I'll clean myself up. You didn't take my words seriously, did you? We were not taught to behave like this in society, but I know the elementary rules of etiquette. When Isabella emerged from the room, Wilson gasped. Before him stood a gorgeous woman in a dark dress, just above the knees. Her breasts were adorned with a simple gold chain and pendant, and her thick mane of dark brown hair fell loosely around her shoulders. Light makeup made expressive, lively, green eyes. Slender legs in low-heeled shoes were striking. Christian swallowed nervously, imagining how he would caress those beautiful legs. I'm shocked. It was all he could say, wondering what kind of underwear she was wearing now. Are we going? Looking at him haughtily, the girl asked. Yes, please. The man ushered her into the car. The ship swayed impatiently on the waves. Waiting for the guests, the captain met them on deck, helped them to board gallantly, bowed his head at the sight of the girl. Good evening, he greeted. Glad to see you aboard the Aurora. Isabella, would you care for a glass of champagne? Wilson asked, waving his hand to the waiter. It will add a little romantic flavor to our evening, and also... He waved again. I love music. Do you mind? In the dim light of the lanterns, 3 musicians appeared, playing a quiet, slow song. Do you like it? The man asked his guest, taking a sip of his glass. He took out a gold bracelet from his pocket and put it on Isabella's thin wrist. I bought it for you. It's beautiful, the girl replied discreetly. Is this how you won the hearts of your mistresses? Were they ready to jump into bed with you? She glanced indifferently at her vis-a-vis. I wonder how much money you intend to spend on my seduction. I expected something more extraordinary. You obviously have problems with imagination. Did you really expect me to fall for this cheap romantic nonsense? No, I'm glad you're paying attention, but I was expecting something a little more sophisticated. I hope. She shivered, showing she was cold. We won't have to spend the night. You. Boiling, Christian. Ungrateful little brat. What have you seen in your life? Dinner aboard a yacht, with a rich man, the limit of your dreams. I can't believe you don't like it here. Why not? Isabella said calmly. I like it, but I dreamed of it when I was 14. Now I've wised up. It's all contrived, momentary. In half an hour we will finish champagne, eat dessert, and then you will try to seduce me, heated by alcohol. How vulgar, and not at all reciprocated. What do you want? Barely containing the anger ready to burst out. Wilson asked. I don't know. Isabella shrugged. Before you hit me in the heart, I want my soul to turn around and soar. For now, she stood up resolutely from the table. I want to go ashore. So everything I've arranged here, he gestured for the musicians to leave. You don't like it? I didn't say I didn't like it. The girl answered evasively. I said it was too corny to win a woman's heart. All right, then, let's go home. They said goodbye to the captain, who gave them a long and surprised look. At home, they went to their rooms. What can I seduce you with? Christian was racking his brain. What? A friend of his told him about his unsuccessful attempt to win a girl's heart. You couldn't handle a hottie? You're getting old, brother. You can't use your old tricks, can you? I should have gotten involved with her. Christian cursed in his heart. I don't know what she wants. Think of something unusual, by the way. I give you an idea. Take her abroad. She probably has not been there. The youth of today, they can't wait to go there. For a poor orphan, it's enough to impress her for a year. Why? The man's on fire. It's not a bad idea. If I get what I want, I'll thank you. You don't have to thank me. I was already wondering how it would end. It's been 2 weeks since Christian prepared the trip abroad. Isabella. Smiling enigmatically, he announced, "Tomorrow you and I are going on a trip. I hope we won't have to take a boat this time. I can't reveal all the details to you yet. Trust me. Wear loose clothes so you'll be comfortable. I have one condition." "What's that?" The girl looked at him suspiciously. "I'll blindfold you. Until a certain point, you must not know where we are going." "Agreed?" "Do you have to be blindfolded?" "Yes, otherwise it won't be a surprise." Isabella was blindfolded and brought to the airport. Christian helped her aboard a private plane, and only there was allowed to remove the blindfold. "An airplane?" the girl asked excitedly, looking out the porthole. "All my life I dreamed of flying in an airplane at least once, so I managed to impress you." "Let's put it this way," Isabella said discreetly. "I like the fact that we're going somewhere. I'm sorry," a few hours later, Wilson informed. "I have to blindfold you again." Isabella was elated in her heart. She had dreamed of traveling for so long. They crossed the helicopter. "I want to see where we are." Isabella fidgeted impatiently in the seat. "Be patient." The man stopped her. "Soon you'll see everything." When the engine died down, Wilson untied the blindfold. "Where are we?" Isabella exhaled in disbelief. "On the roof?" "We're on a rooftop in Paris, and there's dinner waiting for us." He held out his hand to her and led the way. The girl's breath was taken away by the beauty. The city was visible as in the palm of her hand. The warm wind was developing her dark hair. It was a little scary, but Isabella didn't give any sign. "Callie will not believe that I saw the Eiffel Tower with my own eyes," the girl thought. Her heart fluttered with joy, but she didn't want to admit that she was overwhelmed by the incredible adventure. Christian seated her at a table. A waiter appeared from somewhere with a bottle of wine. Another brought hot food. The waitstaff tried to be discreet. "Do you like it?" the man asked, seeing how her green eyes lit up. "I can't say I wasn't moved. It's a little trip," Isabella said. "But I don't understand. Why spend money on meaningless things? I wanted to do something nice for myself. To throw so much money away for an hour's dinner? That's just stupid. Are you trying to make me angry on purpose?" The man spoke softly in a voice that didn't bode well. "Yes, anyone in your place would kiss my feet after such a trip and pray to God for me. I don't see a queue of people falling at your feet in the house." The girl sneered. "Don't forget yourself." He flared up. "I can take you back to where I got you. I'm sick of your antics. So you're admitting defeat? What are you trying to do?" "I'm waiting for you to admit you lost my bet. Where's that famous seduction technique you've been bragging about on every corner? All you know how to do is throw money around. Of course, what better way to impress a silly orphan than with crisp bills? That's all you're capable of. It doesn't bother me. But that's it. I'm sick of you." Christian turned white with anger. "We're going back immediately. I didn't know you were so nervous." Looking regretfully at Paris lying at her feet, the girl said, "If we are here, why not enjoy the view of the City of Lovers? If I am not mistaken, it is also called the City of Lights. The walk along the rooftops was over. The man's up. You ruined it. A few hours later, they were home. You won the bet. The man announced, I'm trying to shake you up, and you're like an impregnable fortress under siege. Everything's wrong with you. Everything's wrong with you. You don't like jewelry. You don't like flowers because you have to throw them away. I don't understand what you want. Any woman in your place would have been happy to share my bed, but you persist in pretending indifference. I don't want to continue this game. I'm sick of it, and I don't want to see you either. So pack your things and get out of my house. Everything I gave you, keep it, and get the hell out of here. I want to forget you like a bad dream. Don't you ever set eyes on me again. If you say so. The girl shrugged her shoulders. Don't be afraid. I won't tell anyone that you can't impress a modern woman with anything. If you say another word, clenched his fists, gritted through his teeth Wilson. I will not vouch for myself. Will you allow yourself to hit a woman? She made big eyes, and her heart sank into her heels at the sight of the enraged man. Isabella did not try her luck, silently packed up and left. Well, what have you achieved? She pondered, walking through the streets of the city. Left at a broken trough, what to do now? In the most difficult moments, she dialed a familiar number. Hello, girlfriend. Isabella. She heard a cheerful exclamation on the other end of the line. I was so afraid for you. I thought you weren't answering your cell phone. What if something terrible happened? I've heard such horror stories about your Wilson. He's not mine. Isabella cut it off. Don't listen to the gossips. Tell me, how are you doing? I'm wandering around town, wondering what I'm gonna do. Christian kicked me out the door. That's news. Kelly was amazed. What are you thinking about? Coming to the orphanage? Or do you want to go back to him? You know, I think he fell in love with me like a boy. I got what I wanted. I made him lose his head. That's why he's mad. What about you? What about me? I don't even like him. Then what are you thinking about? Come back. You'll be welcome here. What am I going to do there? It's too late to go to college. I can't find a place to live right away. Wilson left me some money, of course, but how much is enough? And anyway, why am I showing off? Suddenly, she said, marriage to such a man would open many doors. A modeling agency certainly wouldn't be an obstacle. Isabella, are you crazy? You don't love him. Can you imagine what it's like to live with someone you don't love? So what? I don't care if he loves me. I'm looking forward to marriage with him. I don't recognize you, friend. The girl said sadly. You've never been calculating. I didn't expect to be ambitious myself, but with his help I was able to realize all the plans I had made in the orphanage. Aren't you happy for me? His money will open any door. Isn't that what we dreamed of? Are you really willing to live with a man you don't love? His love is enough for the two of us. Isabella shrugged. I've been tormented by doubts, and now that I've talked to you, I'm sure I must go back to him. Isabella, come to your senses, wailed her friend. I know what I'm doing. I'm thinking more rationally now than ever. Bye. Thanks for listening. Isabella hurried home. She hesitantly opened the door, afraid of being ostracized, and reappeared. Wilson was sitting at the table. A bottle of whiskey stood beside her, almost half empty. And that's you? The man looked at her with a cloudy stare. Why did you come here? To make fun of me? Yes, you failed. Who doesn't? I came to tell you that I've agreed to marry you. An unexpected decision. He grinned wryly. I lost, didn't I? If you remember, there was a second part to the bet. If you fall in love with me, we go to register the marriage. You do love me, don't you? What does that change? It changes everything. I agree to be your wife. You haven't changed your mind about marrying me, have you? Change your mind? Christian sobered up immediately. Yes, I've been dreaming of calling you my wife for months. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a gold ring with a large diamond. You see, I even bought a ring for my future wife. I didn't think it would come in handy so soon. He stood up, walked over to Isabella, took her hand, and put the expensive ring on her ring finger. Will you marry me? Yes, Isabella answered decisively. Though it felt as if she had jumped into a whirlpool. Isabella, hello. Hear the woman in the phone, a familiar voice of a friend. Hello, sobbing Isabella answered. Are you crying? Kelly was worried. I hate him. The woman confessed. He ruined my whole life. He hit me. Again? Terrified, exclaimed the girlfriend. Yes, Isabella cried. He came in drunk. I just asked him where he'd been all night, and then he started. He yelled that it was none of my business, and then he hit me. Good thing my son didn't see. I don't understand what happened to him. You always said he loved you. He did, but then it went away, and it all started when I had Brian. He still can't forgive me for finishing college, and I wanted to study. I wasn't going to bury myself in housework. He didn't like it. Good for you for not giving in and finishing your degree, even if it was by correspondence. It's a popular specialty, finance and credit. If something happens, you can always provide for yourself and your son. That's when we started to have disagreements. He was jealous of every pillar. You should have seen how mad he got when I hired a nanny for our boy so I could study. That's when he started hitting the bottle. He'd get drunk. He'd get out of control. The first time he hit me was when I accused him of cheating. You should have heard the way he screamed. I thought he was gonna kill me. Since then, he's never been shy about laying a hand on me. I don't envy you. I think I'm happy. I never felt happy, and now I don't feel happy at all. Alcohol has changed him beyond recognition. No trace of his former love for me. He's disappeared from home more and more often. I know for a fact that he spends his time in the company of strange women. Do you know how disgusting it is to see him with lipstick on his collar? Are you going to put up with that? No, of course not. I kept quiet for a long time, hoping he'd come to his senses, but every year it gets worse. How does he run the firm? That's the point. The firm was starting to die. I realized if I didn't take over, we'd go bankrupt sooner or later. You're doing great. You're going to do great. Yeah, but I've never worked a day in my specialty. So what? Prove to him and to yourself that you're worth something. You were the smartest among us. You can do it. Isabella puzzled over which side of the firm to revitalize. The first thing she decided to do was to talk to her husband about her son. Christian, I need to consult with you. Having had a moment when he was relatively sober, the woman spoke. What do you want from me? He was irritated, his head ached, he wanted a drink, but Isabella had locked herself in the study with him and wouldn't let him have one. Give me a drink, demanded the man. No, the woman said firmly. Let's talk first. You didn't get anything mixed up. What are you doing bossing me around? Have you forgotten where you belong? I might remind you, if you don't listen to me now, we both risk the abyss. She bravely endured his ominous stare. Well, speak, yes, quickly. I want to send my son to study abroad. What on earth are you talking about? The Christian burst into a fit of rage. I will not give my consent. You'll have to agree. Isabella said calmly, I'm sending him away because I don't have the opportunity to pay much attention to him. Explain? If you don't know, our firm's business is bad. You don't have time to deal with it. You've had other interests lately. The woman sneered. None of your business. Christian snapped at her. I'm fed up with you. Do you think I've forgotten that you decided to study without consulting me? My knowledge will come in handy now. I want to try to keep our firm afloat. What? The man laughed. You. What do you know about business? Without me, you're nothing. If I want, our business will go up, and you take care of the house and the child, and do not interfere where you are not asked. Right now, I need to intervene. I demand that you authorize me to sign documents. On what grounds do you demand it? On the grounds that I'm your lawfully wedded wife. You're going to ruin the firm. We won't lose anything. It'll be dead soon enough, and if I can save the business, fine, to hell with you. You've already succeeded once with me. The man snorted. Call a notary, I'll issue a permit. After all, I can always cancel all contracts. I think you won't have to blush for me. And Isabella began to master. Christian at first freaked out, and when he realized that his wife gradually began to get everything, sang blackly of his own impotence. How many times? The woman was indignant. You drink every day. I need your help so much. Why? You're doing a great job already. But you're experienced, you know the firm inside and out, and I have to learn everything all over again. I told you couldn't do it. I can handle it. Isabella was stubborn. Just don't drink, please. She had no idea that a healthy-looking man could fall victim to an insidious disease. One night she stayed late at work. Why is it so quiet at home? Isabella wondered as she entered the living room. Christian, where are you? Did you go to bed already? I need your advice. I think I've figured out why things aren't going well. She looked into the kitchen. Her husband was nowhere to be found. She opened the bedroom door and was horrified. Christian, what's wrong? Isabella rushed to her husband, who was lying on the floor with his arm tucked under him. Christian, don't frighten me. The man mumbled, writhing in pain as his wife tried to lift him up. Christian? Isabella cried, startled by the realization. You're having a stroke. Wait, I'll call an ambulance. She called the doctor, asked the guards to move her husband to the couch. Unfortunately, you're right, Christian is having a stroke. Confirmed my worst guesses, doctor. His right side is paralyzed. I'll prescribe therapy, of course, but whether he'll make a full recovery, I can't say. We don't know exactly how long it was before you found him. The outcome of the disease depends on that. Doctor. Isabella grabbed the man's arm fearfully. I beg you, don't tell anyone that Christian is paralyzed. If partners and competitors find out about his condition, our business will be ruined. I'll repay you whatever you say, and I'll pay you for your silence. Good. The doctor looked at the woman in surprise. It's up to you. You're in shock now. We'll talk later. One more favor. Help me find a professional nurse for him. That won't be a problem. I promise I'll find the best one. What am I supposed to do now? Pray to God and don't give up hope. Christian, young man, he'll do fine. Isabella is immersed in business. Not a living soul knew that Christian lay a vegetable in their big house. Only the nurse and the cook were allowed to see him. Isabella. One day the secretary informed her. A rival firm wants to see you. What is it? Isabella felt a chill go through her. They didn't say, but they've set up a meeting for tomorrow at the cafe. Well, let them know I'm ready to meet. Oh, and tell the chief accountant I'm expecting 6 months' worth of returns. Half an hour later, the chief accountant showed up. Isabella, he began. I don't understand why you're digging through old reports. Chuckling to himself in a mustache, the man asked, why should such a pretty head have to bother with such dull figures? Christian, check them. I don't think you'll find anything interesting there. I'm interested." Trying not to lose her composure, the woman replied, "To understand why lately we've had lucrative deals fall through, why the materials we partially paid for don't arrive on time, you can answer me these questions, can't you?" "Well, my dear," stretching words and hinting that she knows nothing about the affairs of the construction company, said the chief accountant, "it happens, sometimes deals are broken and suppliers let down. It's all business. I need a full report and analysis of the working firm. If you can't give clear answers to my questions, I won't keep you. You're firing me." The man's eyes widened in surprise. "I do not need people who do not cope with their duties and also let you openly laugh at the head of the firm. You're not the head of the firm. As long as my husband is sick, I am the head of the firm. If you don't want to follow my orders, the door's over there. Do you understand? Instead of helping me to save the firm, you're sticking your fingers in my wheel. Christian is sick, and you're happy to tear up his life's work, you ingrates. My husband has done so much for you. I see you get a good salary, go, work, and that by the evening, the report was on my desk," Isabella said firmly. Shocked by her rebuff, the chief accountant silently went to his office. "Can you imagine?" The man was indignant. "She told me off like a boy. I've been working in this company for 20 years, she, without a year a week, and already in full command. Who is she anyway?" Supported his colleague. "We have never seen her before in our lives. They say she has not worked. How will she be able to save the company? Did Christian buy her diploma? Yeah, someone gets gold, but she gets a diploma. With that kind of knowledge, she shouldn't be in business. How did she manage to marry Christian? He was a confirmed bachelor. Don't you know how girls like that get married? With a figure like that, a face like that, you could seduce anyone. I can't wait for Christian to come back to us. I know in my heart she'll bring the firm to a standstill. I wonder how she'll sort out the accounts. She probably only knows how to spend money. Why are you going after her? Isabella's got an advocate. Let her try, see if it works out. Christian will be back, and her competitors aren't dormant. You mark my words, they'll try to get their hands on the firm." The next day, Isabella came to the cafe to meet with a representative of a rival firm. "What did you want to tell me?" Without further ado, the woman asked, "How's your health, Christian?" "By your prayers. I don't think you asked me here to ask about Christian's health. Tell me what you wanted to say." "I don't have much time." "It has come to our attention," the man spoke softly, "that your firm has been experiencing some difficulties in recent months. We'd like to help. Help how? We'd like to buy your firm out of your problems. Why would a pretty woman like you take on a huge business? You don't know much about construction, to put it mildly. Yes, things are a little rough right now, but it's only temporary." Barely restraining, ready to burst out of emotion, said Isabella, "We are not going to sell the business. Christian is seriously ill. Will he be able to return to the management of the company? Don't doubt it. He is already on the mend. Perhaps we could meet him then and talk things over. Maybe he'd be interested in our offer. He's got his health to worry about, and the problems at work could aggravate his illness. Shouldn't you be so worried about my husband's health? The doctors are doing all the necessary procedures to get him back on his feet. And by the way, they don't recommend disturbing him. As I said, we have no plans to sell the firm. My husband is in the loop, and I'm coordinating with him. As far as I'm concerned, the business is in a critical state, and we're offering a good price. No, don't persuade me. My husband will soon get back on his feet and figure things out on his own, but in the meantime, I'm doing a good job of running the firm. I hear the employees don't trust you very much. I wonder how you know so much about our firm. Oh, I get it. There's an inside man on the payroll. let's not talk about that." The man avoided answering. "If you'll excuse me, I have to go." Isabella got up from the table. "We have nothing more to talk about, so you'll consider our offer?" "I won't be able to offer such a favorable price next time. My answer is no." Isabella flew to work. "We have a mole. How did I not realize?" she thought. "That explains everything. My job is to find it, and the sooner the better." She meticulously studied every document, even taking her work home. There in silence, she worked easier than under the gaze of subordinates, who frankly laughed behind her back, skeptical of her ability to pull the firm out of a series of bad deals. Imagine that. She complained to her friend. "They don't take me seriously." "No wonder." Callie laughed. "With the way you look. Who's gonna believe you're good at accounting?" "That you're so smart. I have to find the mole, or our competitors will be working ahead of us. Think, analyze, concentrate, and then everything will work out." And Isabella, day after day, got deeper and deeper into her work. "Explain it to me, please." Looking at the contracts, she asked the chief engineer, "How come we refuse to build a shopping center on such a profitable site?" So their geodesist surveyed and concluded that the soil is not suitable for construction. Then why did the competitors start construction on this very territory? "I don't know." The man was embarrassed. "Who made the decision not to build?" "That's how He stopped talking. "The address of the surveyors who did the report." "So he hesitated." "That's right. Their firm closed down." "How is that possible?" "Why are you being so secretive? Get me the chief accountant right away." "He paid for the work done, right?" "He must know the address of the company." The chief accountant entered the office cautiously, explained how it happened that the firm, which made a conclusion about the state of the soil on the site on which they planned to build a shopping center, closed immediately after signing the papers. "Give me its address. I'll go to deal with it myself." "So know the address," mumbled the chief accountant. "I wonder how many plots we lost because of this fake firm." The men looked at each other in silence. "You both immediately write a letter of resignation." Isabella ordered quietly but firmly, "You have no right to fire us." The chief engineer shrieked. "We were hired by Christian." "Don't you dare poke me. I'm in charge of personnel here now. Get out, both of you." "Isabella," the receptionist came flying in. "How could you fire the most responsible employees? Christian wouldn't allow it." Christian didn't realize that these responsible employees had recently started working for the competition. Simply put, they were selling out, betraying their boss. "If you don't agree with my decision, I will quickly find a replacement for you." Isabella looked at the girl expectantly. She shamefully kept silent. "That's fine. Now you need to find replacements for these two honorable people. It is better if it will be found among our employees." "Okay, I understand, but what should I tell the staff?" "I'll figure it out." The girl left, and Isabella took a deep breath, then got up and went to the conference room. "Gather me the heads of departments in accounting. I need a lawyer immediately." "Right away." The secretary looked at Isabella with respect. 10 minutes later, everyone was gathered in the hall. "I fired 2 employees. After a thorough investigation of the firm, it turned out that they were working for competitors. Now I believe our business will be more successful. I need your support. Christian has stepped aside for now. I'll need time to sort things out. If anyone is unhappy with the woman at the helm of the firm, they can report it immediately. The rest of you, I demand full commitment. If you have any candidates in mind, I don't mind reviewing their resumes. Any questions? Then let's get to work." The employees came out of the meeting puzzled. "So much for the model." They marveled. "And we laughed at her, But she was so clever. Even Christian could not find the moles, and she quickly identified them. So how could those who started the firm with him be suspicious? Don't get too excited before the competition finds out Christian's doing badly. If no one tells, maybe it'll be all right. But the competitors weren't dormant. Wilson's business was too tasty. They were getting closer and closer to the firm, probing for weaknesses. Isabella realized their lost interest was temporary. Isabella. One day, a secretary came flying into the office. I tried to stop them, but you shouldn't try to stop me. Pushing the secretary away, a handsome young man entered the office with a brisk stride. Isabella noted his lean figure, thick, dark hair, and brown eyes that glowed with mockery. He sat down in the chair uninvited. It's nothing to worry about. The woman calmed the secretary. I'll take care of it. Who are you? She asked as the door closed behind the girl. My name is Charles. I'm offering to sell me your firm. What makes you think I'm going to sell it? I'm aware of your problems. You're not the first to know my problems, but I'm the first to tell you we're going to get this thing back on track. If you have no more questions for me, please leave the office. You're interfering with my work, or I'll have to call security. I know Christian is paralyzed. He can't go back to work, and you don't know anything about construction. I'm amazed at your knowledge. Isabella looked mockingly at the intruder, but her heart clenched with fear. But Christian will be fine, and I'm not bad with finances, for your information. I'll make sure you can't sign any lucrative contracts. Are you threatening me? In return, when Christian comes back to the firm, and he will, you'll be in trouble. We have a good reputation. You will not be able to ruin the business. If you do not leave, I will dig up dirt on you. I've already got material on how you've been diverting customers away from us through front men. I'll make it public. Are you willing to risk it? You bet your ass I will. Christian will back me up. He knows everything that goes on around the firm. If you try to destroy us, I won't stand by and retaliate. Bitch, the man hissed. It was nice to meet you. The woman smiled through force. She was nervous, her lips trembling. I dare not delay you any longer. I'm leaving, but I'll be back. Good riddance. Left alone, Isabella, without strength, leaned back in her chair and cried. Isabella, are you all right? Alarmed, her secretary asked, entering the office after the guest had left. Would you like me to make you some tea? Thank you, I'd appreciate it. And you are good, the secretary said, putting a cup with steaming tea. No one believed that you could manage the firm. I didn't believe it myself. Tiredly replied the woman. I had to learn no one knows what will happen to us next. I will not be left alone for a long time, these businessmen. You have successfully won the first battle. I think this is just the beginning. How much do I miss Christian? He's been in a borderline state for almost a month. There was a phone call. Isabella? The woman on the phone heard the excited voice of the nurse. Christian, he's awake. Roger, on my way. What's wrong? The secretary asked, seeing the change in her face. Christian came to his senses. I'm leaving now. Don't tell anyone yet. Isabella hurried home. She didn't know how she saw her husband and was afraid to meet him. Are you here? He turned his head at the sound of the creaking door. Christian spoke slurred. Isabella rather read his lips what he said. He was pale, a wry grin on his face, saliva flowing helplessly from the corner of his mouth. I'm glad you've come to your senses. She crouched carefully beside him on the bed, wiped his chin with a napkin. Leave us alone, she asked the nurse. How are you? There is no more of me, just a semblance of a human being. The man tried to smile. His face twisted even more. What about the firm? Did you manage to sell it? I managed to save the firm. You did? Christian's eyes flashed first with bewilderment, then surprise, then joy, then tears. I didn't believe in you. I was sure we were ruined. Think about it. How could I let everything you've built up over the years go to waste? How did you do it? I scrutinized the documents and found the moles. Who? The man marveled. Who are they? Your main assistants. I don't believe it. It's a good thing I didn't have an old friendship with them. I couldn't trust anyone, so I evaluated everyone with a cold head, and that's how I found the traitors. And our business immediately went better. The staff found in the firm, people responsible, most importantly, they believed me. It was difficult to shut the mouth of competitors. They were ready to swallow us, but it was not to be. I am not one of the fearful. I remember. Christian grinned with difficulty. I was able to fend off the first 2 attacks. The woman was silent, but we hope for your recovery. That you've come to your senses is a good sign. I'm not deceived. He looked at his wife carefully, and I realize my present condition is only a temporary improvement. I feel I don't have much time left. Don't say that. Hotly, Isabella exclaimed. You'll make it. No, I'm done for. I'm not getting my hopes up. He closed his eyes and was silent. Tell me, did you love me a little? He asked, after a moment's pause, looking pitifully at his wife. Don't lie to me. I want to know the truth. No. Quietly confessed the woman. I never loved you. I knew I felt you didn't love me, but I had hoped so much to be wrong. You're legendary in business circles, even have your own admirers. Ah, she picked up on Charles' mocking tone. I thought you were here to take over the firm again. I have another suggestion. Why don't we merge our firms? I'm doing fine. I don't need anyone's help. Isabella. Charles came very close to her, handed her flowers. She buried her face in them, savoring the fragrance. I liked you right away, that memorable meeting. I didn't expect to be rebuffed. I was told you were a beautiful doll with no brains, but I realized from the first minute that you were a smart and confident woman. I was afraid to admit even to myself that I was in love. You know, it happens, but you were married at the time, and then the funeral. I didn't want to be intrusive. I decided to wait, but now you're free. Why can't I tell you that I like you? And you come to me so easily after the threats I heard from you in my office? Forgive me. I'm ready to beg your forgiveness. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. In the fight against the competition, all means are good. I'm sorry. I realized long ago that I was wrong. You have a good tongue. Isabella laughed. It's the excitement. Charles confessed. What is it? Can I expect reciprocation? Charles, the woman grew serious. I do not want to give you hope, so I confess at once, I am not ready for a serious relationship. I've had some unfortunate experiences in married life. I'm just now beginning to live, to breathe. I was deprived of all this for many years to break free from dependence on my husband. It cost me a lot of labor and nerves. You can't imagine what I've been through. To go back into the care of another man? No way. I assure you, I won't restrict your freedom. I wish I could believe you, but I can't. Is there any hope that someday you'll reciprocate? I don't know. We don't know each other very well. Well, let's get to know each other. Charles came to life. I'm inviting you to a restaurant tonight. No need. Isabella headed for the car. I like to have dinner at home with my son. How do you feel about children, by the way? I didn't know you had a son. The man was surprised. Christian never talked about him. He probably never said anything about me either. The woman grinned. Yes, I have a son, and you'll have to earn his favor if you're going to court me. Did I scare you? So you'll let me court you? I'm ready. The persistent suitor has perked up. Invite me to visit. I want to make sure that you are not only smart and beautiful, but also a good cook. If that's the case, then you're definitely my woman. Isabella got into the car, started it, carefully placed the bouquet next to her. The man looked at her with regret. Suddenly, she rolled down the window. If you want, come to visit me on Sunday afternoon. I'll introduce you to my son and feed you lunch. I'll definitely come. Charles exclaimed joyfully, looking at the car in which the amazing woman was sitting. I won't let you go anywhere. He promised. I will do everything I can to make you learn to trust again. My love can warm your soul. I promise you that we will be happy.